My father told me over the phone not to come to Thanksgiving because my restaurant uniform would ruin the high-class aesthetic my sister wanted for her new fiancé. I agreed. But the next morning at 7 o'clock, my entire family pounded on my door to accuse me of embarrassing them. Standing there in my pajamas, I watched my sister's perfect fiancé stare at me in shock and ask if I was the chef who saved his entire company last season. That was the moment I knew I had already won. My name is Tessa Rios. I am 31 years old, and I smell like a campfire that has been doused in brown butter and thyme. This is not a metaphor. It is the physical reality of being the executive sous chef at Willow and Ember, the most demanding fine dining establishment in Lakebridge, Illinois. My hair holds the scent of hickory wood smoke from the open hearth. My hands are stained with the phantom oils of rosemary and garlic. My apron, which I had just untied and tossed into the laundry bin, was a map of the night service, speckled with reductions and emulsions that people pay hundreds of dollars to taste. It was 2 a.m. on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The kitchen was finally silent, save for the low hum of the industrial refrigerators and the rhythmic ticking of cooling metal. I had spent the last 12 hours on my feet, commanding a brigade of cooks, ensuring that every plate of roasted duck and every garnish of microgreens was perfect. I was exhausted in a way that felt less like tiredness and more like a heavy, comfortable gravity. I had done my job. I had done it well. I pushed open the heavy steel back door and stepped out into the employee parking lot. The air in Lakebridge was biting, a sharp Midwestern chill that found the gaps in my coat immediately. It was the kind of cold that usually woke me up, but tonight I just felt heavy. I fished my keys out of my pocket, ready to go home, shower for an hour, and sleep until noon. Then my phone rang. I frowned at the screen. It was my father. He never called this late, or this early, depending on how you looked at it. In the Rios family, communication was usually filtered through my mother or delegated to a group chat where my sister, Savannah, posted updates about her life that required heart reactions. I answered, my voice raspy from shouting orders over the roar of the exhaust fans. "Hello. Dad, is everything okay?" There was no preamble, no greeting. His voice was crisp, alert, and completely devoid of warmth. It was the tone he used when he was negotiating a deal for his landscaping business, or when he was explaining to a waiter why a wine bottle was unacceptable. "Tessa, we need to talk about tomorrow," he said. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. I had requested the morning shift at the restaurant specifically, so I could make it to my parents' house by 4 p.m. I had already prepped the cranberry sauce they liked, the one with the orange zest and Grand Marnier, even though they never really acknowledged who made it. "Okay," I said, leaning against the freezing metal of my car door. "What about tomorrow? Do you need me to bring extra wine?" "No," he said. He paused, not out of hesitation, but seemingly to select the most efficient words. "We have been discussing the logistics for the dinner. As you know, this is not just a family meal. This is Savannah's official introduction of Marcus to the extended family and to her followers." I nodded. Even though he could not see me, I knew. Savannah Rios, my 28-year-old sister, was a lifestyle influencer. That was her job title. She curated moments. She lived her life through a filter of beige tones and soft lighting. Marcus, her new fiancé, was apparently the crown jewel of her collection. He was wealthy, connected, and according to Savannah, perfect for her brand. "I know. Dad," I said, suppressing a yawn, "it is a big deal. I will be there on time. I will even wear the dress Mom approved last year." "No, Tessa," he interrupted. His voice dropped an octave, becoming colder. "That is the point. We do not think you should come." I froze. The wind bit at my exposed neck, but I did not feel it anymore. "I am sorry?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard him due to the poor reception in the alleyway. "You do not think I should come?" Dad sighed, a sound of impatience. "Look at it from our perspective. Tessa, this dinner is a concept. Savannah has a sponsorship deal with a table decor company. Marcus invited 2 of his partners from the hospitality group. We are going for a very specific aesthetic, European luxury, clean, polished, high society. He paused, letting the words hang there, waiting for me to connect the dots so he would not have to say it. When I stayed silent, he continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge. You work in a kitchen. Tessa, you always arrive looking exhausted. You smell like grease and smoke. Your hands are burned. You have those bags under your eyes. It disrupts the visual. It disrupts the visual. I stood there, grip tightening on my phone until my knuckles turned white. I looked down at my hands. He was right. I had a small burn on my thumb from a splashing pan of duck fat earlier that night. My nails were short and clean, but my skin was dry from scrubbing. They were working hands. They were the hands that paid my rent, the hands that had built a career in one of the toughest industries in the country. But to him, they were just ugly props that would ruin the set design. Are you saying? I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. That I am banned from Thanksgiving because I look like a chef? Because I have a job? I am saying that for one night, we need perfection, he replied, unbothered by my tone. And frankly, Tessa, you do not fit the image. Marcus is from a different world. Savannah has worked very hard to cultivate this lifestyle. We do not want any distractions. We do not want the smell of a commercial kitchen lingering on the upholstery while they are taking photos. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was not done with anger. He was not shouting. It was a calculated business decision. I was a liability to the brand. I was the glitch in the software of their perfect family portrait. I waited for him to say he was joking. I waited for him to say that they would miss me, or that we could do something else on Friday. Instead, there was just silence on the line. He was waiting for me to agree. He was waiting for me to accept my role as the background noise that needed to be muted. Because of the family image, he added, as if that explained everything, as if that justified erasing his eldest daughter from the holiday. I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. 15 years of this. 15 years of being the practical one, the sturdy one, the one who did not need praise while Savannah needed a parade for waking up in the morning. Okay, I whispered. Good, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. He had closed the deal. We knew you would understand. It is just for 1 year. We will send you some photos. He hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone. The call had lasted less than 2 minutes. In that short span of time, my father had confirmed what I had suspected for a decade, but was too afraid to admit. I was not a member of the family. I was an accessory that had gone out of style. I unlocked my car and climbed inside, the leather seat freezing against my legs. I sat there for a long time, key in the ignition, not turning it. I looked out at the empty parking lot, lit by the sickly yellow glow of the street lamps. A stray cat darted across the asphalt, seeking shelter from the wind. I felt small. I felt incredibly, painfully small. I started the engine and drove out of the lot. Lakebridge was asleep. It was a beautiful town, situated right on the edge of the water, full of historic brick buildings and trees that were currently stripped bare by winter. Usually, I loved driving home at this hour. The streets were mine. The traffic lights blinked yellow, yielding to me. It was peaceful. Tonight, the silence felt oppressive. As I drove past the large, colonial-style houses on the hill, the kind my parents lived in, I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner taking place tomorrow without me. I imagined the table. Savannah would have set it with cream-colored linens and gold cutlery. There would be a centerpiece of white roses, because Savannah hated orange and brown. Even though it was November, the turkey would be a prop, probably ordered from a high-end caterer because Savannah did not cook, and my mother preferred not to ruin her manicure. They would sit there, looking perfect, my father in his cashmere sweater, my mother with her pearls, Savannah in some silk dress she had been gifted by a brand, and Marcus, the mysterious, wealthy fiancé. I wondered if they would even mention my name, or would my absence be a relief, a smoother surface for them to project their image upon. I thought about all the times I had been made to feel less than, the time I won a regional cooking competition in high school, and my parents missed it because Savannah had a dance recital, The time I got promoted to sous chef, and my mother asked when I was going to get a real job that did not involve working nights. The constant comments about my uniform, my smell, my lack of makeup. "You are so intense. Tessa," my mother would say, "why can you not just be soft, like your sister?" I turned onto my street. I lived in a 3-story walk-up near the river. It was not a mansion. It did not have granite countertops or a walk-in closet, but it was mine. I paid for every square inch of it with money I earned standing over open flames. I parked the car and trudged up the stairs. My legs felt like lead. I unlocked my door and stepped into the warmth of my apartment. It was small, but it was clean. My kitchen, though tiny, was equipped with the best knives and pans I could afford. This was my sanctuary. I dropped my keys on the counter and walked into the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My father was right about that. There were dark circles under my eyes. My skin was pale. My hair, pulled back in a messy bun, was frizzy from the humidity of the dishwasher steam. I leaned in closer. I sniffed my shoulder. Smoke, thyme, roasted garlic. To me, it smelled like hard work. It smelled like passion. It smelled like the 600 covers we had served tonight, making 600 people happy. To my family, it smelled like failure. I started to unbutton my chef's coat. The white double-breasted jacket was stiff with starch. I peeled it off and threw it into the hamper. Underneath, I wore a simple gray t-shirt. I looked at my arms. There were small scars here and there, little kisses from hot oil and sharp edges, badges of honor. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. I flinched, thinking it might be my mother piling on, telling me to make sure I did not accidentally show up and ruin the surprise. I looked at the screen. It was not my mother. It was Chef Miller, the executive chef and owner of Willow and Ember. The text was short. "See you tomorrow. Rios, get some sleep. You are the soul of the day." I stared at the words. The soul of the day. My family had banned me from their table, but they had forgotten something, or perhaps they just did not care enough to know. For the last 5 years, Willow and Ember had hosted a community Thanksgiving event. It was not a soup kitchen line. It was a sit-down, 3-course meal for anyone in Lakebridge who had nowhere else to go. The elderly, the lonely, the struggling families, the students stuck on campus. We transformed the fine dining room into a community hall. And for the last 2 years, Chef Miller had put me in charge of it. I was the one who designed the menu. I was the one who organized the volunteers. I was the one who made sure we had enough turkeys, enough stuffing, enough pumpkin pies, tomorrow. While my family was posing for photos with their cold catering, I would be feeding 300 people hot, made from scratch food. My father thought I was just a line cook with dirty fingernails. He did not know that in my world, in the world that actually mattered, I was a leader. I looked back at the mirror. The exhaustion was still there, but something else was creeping in behind the eyes. A spark, a little flame of anger that was quickly hardening into resolve. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me to be invisible so I would not tarnish their shine. I washed my face, scrubbing away the grease and the sweat. I brushed my teeth, spitting out the minty foam. I took down my hair and let it fall around my shoulders. I walked out of the bathroom and went to my small desk by the window. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I pulled up the spreadsheet for tomorrow's event. Volunteer roster. Full. Prep list. Completed. Turkeys. Brining since Tuesday. I ran my finger over the trackpad. I thought about Savannah's fiancé. Marcus. I had never met him. I only knew he was in hospitality. High level. My father treated him like a visiting dignitary. I wondered what Marcus would think if he knew the truth. I wondered if he knew that the girl banned from the table was the same woman who ran the kitchen at the best restaurant in the city. Probably not. To them, I was just Tessa, poor Tessa, messy Tessa, the one who played with food while the adults did business. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. My father's words echoed in my head. It disrupts the visual. They thought they had hurt me, and they had. The pain was a dull ache in my chest, a familiar bruising from years of hitting the same wall. But beneath the pain, there was clarity. For years, I had been trying to buy a seat at their table. I had tried to be cleaner, quieter, more successful in ways they could understand. I had tried to scrub the smell of smoke off my skin. I realized now that I had been trying to wash away the best part of myself. If they did not want me, they did not get me. Not my presence, not my effort, and certainly not my cranberry sauce. I turned away from the window and climbed into my bed. The sheets were cold, but I curled up, pulling the duvet tight around my chin. They thought they had just kicked me out of Thanksgiving. They thought they had solved a problem. They had no idea that they had just severed the last tether holding me to them. They had no idea that by pushing me away, they were pushing me directly into the path of something and someone that would shatter their perfect little picture frame into a million pieces. Tomorrow, I would not be the disappointed daughter sitting at home. Tomorrow, I would be Chef Rios, and I had 300 guests to feed. Let them have their aesthetic. I had work to do. I sat at my small kitchen table, the laminate cool under my elbows. The city of Lakebridge was waking up outside my window, the sky turning a bruised purple color that signaled the coming dawn. In front of me, lying on top of a leather-bound notebook filled with scribbled recipes and grease stains, was an old plastic card. It was a bus pass. The corners were peeling, revealing the white plastic underneath the faded graphic of the city transit logo. The magnetic strip on the back was scratched to oblivion. It had expired more than a decade ago, but I kept it. I used it as a bookmark. I used it as a reminder. To my parents, that card was a lesson in humility. To me, it was the first vehicle I ever owned. It was my getaway car. I ran my thumb over the jagged edge of the card, and suddenly, the smell of my apartment, coffee and stale wood smoke, faded away. I was back in the house on Elm Street. Growing up, the Rios household was not a home, it was a showroom. My mother kept the floors so polished that you could see your own terrified reflection in the hardwood. We had white carpets in the living room that were strictly forbidden territory, like a museum exhibit behind velvet ropes. There were coasters for the coasters. There were towels in the bathroom that were purely decorative, stiff and scratchy, never to be touched by damp hands. Everything was curated for an audience that, at the time, did not even exist yet. Savannah was the centerpiece of this pristine gallery. From the moment she could walk, she was performing. My parents enrolled her in ballet, tap, and jazz before she could even tie her own shoes. I remember sitting on the stairs, watching my mother adjust the lighting in the foyer so she could film Savannah twirling in her tutu. "Smile, sweetie," my mother would coo, holding up the bulky camcorder that was the ancestor of today's iPhone ring lights. "Chin up, look at the lens. That is it. Perfect." Savannah would beam, a practiced, porcelain smile that reached her eyes on command. She learned early that love was something you earned by being photogenic. She learned that affection was transactional, measured in how well you fit into the frame. I, on the other hand, was usually in the back of the house, in the small service kitchen that my mother rarely entered because the ventilation was poor. That was where my grandmother, my abuela, held court. If the front of the house smelled like lemon polish and expensive potpourri, the back kitchen smelled like life. It smelled of yeast rising in a warm bowl, of garlic sizzling in olive oil, of roasted peppers and burnt sugar. While Savannah was learning to pirouette, I was learning to knead dough. I was 8 years old the first time Abuela let me handle the flour. I remembered the feeling of the cool, powdery dust coating my hands, the way it turned into a sticky living thing when we added the water. I was covered in it. It was in my hair, on my nose, on my eyelashes. When I walked out to show my mother the loaf of bread we had made, she did not look at the bread. She looked at my shirt. "Tessa, look at you," she had sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You are a mess. Go change before someone sees you." She did not ask how it tasted. She did not ask if I had fun. She only cared that I was dirty. That dynamic never shifted. It only hardened like concrete as we grew older. The disparity became undeniable on our 16th birthdays. I remembered Savannah's 16th birthday as if it were a scene from a high-budget teen movie. My parents had organized a party in the backyard. They hired a DJ. They catered food that looked beautiful but tasted like cardboard. At the height of the party, my father led Savannah out to the driveway. He covered her eyes with his hands while my mother filmed the entire thing. There, sitting in the driveway with a giant red bow on the hood, was a pearl-white SUV. It was brand new. The leather interior smelled like money. Savannah screamed. She cried. She jumped into my father's arms. She looked at the camera and thanked the world. It was a perfect moment, manufactured for maximum impact. 2 years prior, on my 16th birthday, the scene had been very different. It was a Tuesday morning. We were in the kitchen. There were no balloons. There was no camera. My father was drinking his coffee, reading the business section of the paper. My mother slid a small white envelope across the granite island toward me. "Happy birthday, Tessa," she said without looking up from her yogurt. I opened the envelope. Inside was a plastic card, a monthly pass for the city bus system. I stared at it, confused. I had my learner's permit. I had been saving money from babysitting to help pay for gas if I could borrow the family station wagon. "We think it is time you learned how the real world works," my father said, folding his newspaper. "A car is a privilege. Tessa, it is something you earn. This pass will get you to school and back. If you want to go anywhere else, you figure it out." "But," I started to say, thinking of the car they had promised to help me buy if I kept my grades up. My mother cut me off. "You need to build character. Tessa, you are too distinct. You need to learn to blend in, to work for what you want. Besides, a car is a liability. Insurance is expensive." I took the card. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just nodded and said thank you. That afternoon, I used the pass to go downtown. I walked into a small, greasy spoon diner called the Iron Skillet and asked for a job. The manager, a grueling man named Sal with a stained apron, looked at my soft suburban hands and laughed. "You want to work?" he asked. "Start washing dishes." So I did. I spent my 16th year elbow deep in gray dishwater, scrubbing eggs off plates and scraping burnt cheese off skillets. I came home every night smelling like old fryer oil and stale coffee. My mother hated it. "You smell disgusting," she would say when I walked in the back door, wrinkling her nose as if I were a bag of garbage. "Do not sit on the furniture until you have showered. That smell of grease and fried onions does not belong in this house. You should find a cleaner job, like working at a boutique or a library." She did not understand. I did not want to be clean. I wanted to be useful. One night, the line cook at the diner walked out in the middle of the dinner rush. Sal was panicking. He looked at me, soaking wet at the sink. "Rios," he yelled, "can you hold a spatula?" I stepped onto the line. It was chaos. It was hot. It was loud. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. I fell into the rhythm of the tickets: burger, medium rare, fries, extra crispy, side of gravy. I made a soup that night. It was just a simple tomato bisque, but I added a dash of smoked paprika and a swirl of heavy cream just before serving, the way Abuela used to do. 20 minutes later, a customer asked to speak to the chef. I froze, terrified I had messed up. I walked out to the counter, wiping my hands on my dirty apron. A truck driver with a beard like steel wool looked at me. "Did you make this?" he asked, pointing to the empty bowl. "Yes, sir," I whispered. "Best damn soup I have had in 10 years, he said. He left a $5 tip. I stared at that $5 bill. It was not much, but it was mine. It was validation. It was proof that I existed. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not because of how I looked, or how I smiled, or how clean my shirt was, but because of what I could create. When I came home that night and told my parents, beaming with pride, my father just shook his head. "It is a nice phase, Tessa," he said dismissively, "but do not get too attached to it. It is manual labor. It is playing around before you find something decent to do with your life. They never saw it as a career. To them, cooking was servitude. It was what the help did. It was not a profession for a Rios. While I was picking up extra shifts and burning my forearms on the grill, Savannah was building her empire. She started a YouTube channel. She joined Instagram. She spent hours in her room filming makeup tutorials and day-in-the-life vlogs. My parents were her production team. My father bought her professional lighting equipment. My mother acted as her manager, negotiating deals with brands that sold teeth-whitening kits and hair gummies. "Look at your sister," my mother would say, showing me a photo of Savannah holding a bottle of detox tea. "She is building a brand. She is investing in her future. You are just working." They saw Savannah as a startup company they were heavily invested in. I was just a bad asset. When I announced I was going to the Midwest Culinary Institute, the silence at the dinner table was deafening. "Cooking school?" my father asked, putting down his fork. "You want to go to trade school to learn how to chop onions?" "It is one of the best programs in the country," I argued. "We are not paying for that," he said flatly. "We are saving for Savannah's college fund. She is going to need a marketing degree to manage her business. If you want to go to cooking school, you pay for it yourself." So I did. I applied for every scholarship available. I wrote essays about the chemistry of baking and the sociology of food. I got a full tuition grant. For my living expenses, I worked 2 jobs. I worked the morning prep shift at a bakery from 4 in the morning until 8, went to class until 3, and then worked the line at a bistro until midnight. I was perpetually exhausted. I missed every family vacation. I missed Christmas Eve 3 years in a row because I was working the holiday service. When I called home to say Merry Christmas, my mother would just sigh. "It is a shame you are so busy. Tessa, you are missing beautiful memories. Savannah looks gorgeous in her red velvet dress." They never asked if I was tired. They never asked if I had eaten. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point, was my graduation. I was graduating with honors. I had been named the most promising chef of my class. It was a huge ceremony in a grand auditorium in downtown Chicago. I had sent them the invitation months in advance. I stood in line with my classmates, wearing my crisp white chef's coat and the tall toque. I scanned the crowd as we walked onto the stage. I looked for my father's gray hair. I looked for my mother's perfectly coiffed bob. The seats I had reserved for them were empty. I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand. I accepted my diploma, and I did it alone. When I checked my phone later, there was a text from Savannah in the family group chat. "So sorry we missed it. Tess, I had a last-minute brand activation for a luxury skincare line, and Mom and Dad had to drive me to the city. We are watching the live stream, though. Congrats." Attached was a photo of the 3 of them in a hotel suite, holding champagne flutes. They looked perfect. They looked happy. They were watching a live stream, but it wasn't mine. I checked Savannah's social media. She was live streaming her get ready with me for the event. My parents were in the background, fixing her hair, handing her accessories. They had skipped my actual graduation to help her film a commercial for face cream. I sat on the curb outside the auditorium, holding my diploma, and I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was angry. I was furious. I realized then that in the economy of our family, I was worthless currency. Savannah was the investment. She was the stock that was soaring. I was just overhead costs. I stopped trying so hard after that. I stopped begging for their approval. I moved to Lakebridge proper. I got the job at Willow and Ember. I worked my way up from station chef to sous chef in record time. I became Tessa Rios, the chef, not Tessa Rios, the disappointing daughter. Sitting in my apartment now, 10 years after that bus pass was given to me, I flipped it over in my fingers. My father's words from last night echoed in my head. "Your uniform will ruin the concept." It was the same story, rewritten for a new season. I was still the smudge on the lens. I was still the smell of onions in a house that wanted to smell like nothing. But looking at the worn plastic card, I realized something else. That bus pass had saved me. If they had given me the car, if they had made my life easy, if they had accepted me into their perfect, hollow world, I might have become like them. I might have become a person who cares more about the appearance of a turkey than the taste of it. I might have become a woman who needs a filter to feel beautiful. Instead, they gave me a ticket to the real world. They told me to go figure it out. And I did. I looked at the clock. It was time to get up. I had a kitchen to run. I had 300 pounds of potatoes to mash and 50 turkeys to roast. I had a team of volunteers waiting for me who would look at me with respect, not disdain. I stood up and tucked the bus pass back into my notebook, marking the page for my signature cranberry sauce recipe. My father was right about one thing. I was an investment, but he was wrong about who was going to reap the returns. They thought Savannah was the prize because she looked good on a screen. They did not understand that while she was posing, I was sharpening my knives. While she was building a following, I was building a foundation. I was not the background character in their show anymore. I was the director of my own. They wanted me to come to the engagement party to work for free. They wanted Chef Tessa when it suited them, but they wanted Invisible Tessa when the cameras were rolling. I walked into my bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. I saw the fatigue, yes, but I also saw the steel. "You want a chef?" I whispered to my reflection. "You are going to get one, but you are not going to like the price." I grabbed my coat. The bus pass stayed on the table, a silent witness to the girl I used to be and the woman I had forced myself to become. It was time to go to work. The sun had not yet fully breached the horizon when I pulled into the back lot of Willow and Ember on Thanksgiving morning. The air was crisp, biting at my cheeks as I stepped out of my car. But as soon as I unlocked the heavy steel service door and stepped inside, the cold vanished. The restaurant was still technically closed, but it felt alive. It was a living, breathing entity that was just waking up. The main dining room lights were dimmed to a warm golden amber, casting long, soft shadows across the mahogany tables that we had pushed together to form long, communal banquet lines. The smell hit me instantly, and it was better than any expensive perfume my mother had ever tried to force on me. It was the deep, savory aroma of turkey stock that had been simmering on the back burner for 24 hours. It was the scent of sage, thyme, and caramelizing onions. It was the smell of comfort. I walked into the kitchen, my sanctuary. It was spotless, the stainless steel counters gleaming under the hood lights. But it was not the sterile, museum-like cleanliness of my parents' house. This was a functional cleanliness, a canvas ready for art. My team was already trickling in. They were not the usual line cooks on the payroll. Today, my brigade was a ragtag army of volunteers, and I loved them fiercely for it. There was Sarah, a single mother who used to work as a server for us 2 years ago before she went back to nursing school. She was already at the prep station, tying her apron with efficient, practiced movements. There was Mr. Henderson, a retired history teacher who had lost his wife the previous year and said the silence of his house was too loud on holidays. He was organizing the silverware, polishing spoons that were already clean, just to have something to do with his hands. And there was David. David was a man in his late 50s with a beard that was now neatly trimmed. Last Thanksgiving, David had been one of our guests. He had been living in a tent under the overbridge by the river. He had come in with his head down, ashamed to take a plate. Today, he was wearing a clean volunteer t-shirt, standing at the sink, ready to wash vegetables. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes bright. "Morning, Chef Tessa," David said, his voice booming with a pride that made my chest ache. "The potatoes are scrubbed and ready for peeling." "Good morning, David," I replied, smiling as I tied my own apron around my waist. The fabric felt like armor. "Thank you. You are a lifesaver." He beamed. In this kitchen, he was not a statistic. He was not a homeless man. He was my vegetable prep lead, and that title meant something. I moved to the center of the line, taking my position at the pass. This was my cockpit. From here, I could see everything. I clapped my hands once, the sound sharp and clear. "All right, everyone," I said. my voice steady and projecting easily to the back of the room. "Let us gather round." They stopped what they were doing and turned to me. There were about 15 of them in total. High school students needing service hours, former staff, regulars from the neighborhood. They looked at me with an expectancy, a respect that I never saw in the eyes of my own father. To them, I was not the disappointment who smelled like grease. I was the captain of the ship. "We have 300 guests expected today," I told them. For many of them, this is the only hot meal they will eat this week. For some, it is the only time anyone will look them in the eye and smile. We are not just serving calories today, we are serving dignity. I saw a few heads nod. The menu is roasted turkey with sage brown butter, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with scratch-made crispy onions, not the canned stuff, and pumpkin pie with spiced chantilly cream. I looked at Sarah. "Sarah, you are on the turkey carving station. Keep the slices thick and generous." "Yes, chef," she said. "Mr. Henderson, I want you in the dining room. You have a great voice. Talk to people. Make them feel like they are at a dinner party, not a charity line." He straightened his spine, looking 2 inches taller. "You got it. Chef? David, you are with me on the mash. We are going to use a shocking amount of butter, okay?" David laughed. "Sounds like a plan. Chef?" We broke the huddle and the kitchen exploded into motion. It was a symphony. The rhythmic chopping of knives against cutting boards provided the percussion. The hiss of the convection ovens opening and closing was the brass section. I moved through the stations, tasting, adjusting, guiding. I dipped a spoon into the gravy. It needed more black pepper. I walked over to the baking station where 2 high school girls were piping whipped cream onto the pies. "Gentle pressure," I instructed, guiding one girl's hand. "Just like that. Beautiful." She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Like this, chef?" "Perfect," I said. She smiled, and I saw a flash of myself at that age, desperate to get it right, desperate for someone to tell me I was doing a good job. My parents never did that. They only pointed out what was out of place. But here, I could be the person I needed when I was 16. The doors opened at 11 in the morning. The line outside had started forming an hour ago. When the first guests walked in, the change in the atmosphere was palpable. The smell of the roasting turkey seemed to wrap around them like a blanket. This event had started 5 years ago as a simple initiative by the restaurant owners to hand out boxed lunches. It was efficient, but it was cold. 2 years ago, when I took over the coordination, I changed it. I argued that handing someone a box and sending them back out into the cold was not hospitality, it was charity. Yes, but it lacked heart. I proposed we open the dining room. We use the real china. We use the real glassware. We treat them like paying customers. The owners were hesitant about the cost and the cleanup, but I promised to handle the logistics. Now, seeing the dining room fill up, I knew I was right. I watched from the pass as an elderly woman took a seat. Mr. Henderson pulled the chair out for her. She looked shocked. Then she touched his arm and whispered a thank you. I turned back to the stove, my heart swelling. This was why I cooked. Midway through the service, things were chaotic but controlled. I was plating turkey at high speed. My hands were moving on instinct. Spoon the mash, ladle the gravy, place the green beans, garnish with parsley, wipe the rim. Next, I felt a tug on my chef coat. I looked down. A small boy, maybe 8 years old, was standing there. He was wearing a coat that was 2 sizes too big for him, the sleeves rolled up in thick cuffs. He was holding a stainless steel spoon from one of the tables. "Hey there." "Bud," I said, pausing my plating. "Do you need something?" He held up the spoon. "I can see my face in it," he said. I crouched down to his level, ignoring the ache in my knees. "It is pretty shiny, right? We polished it just for you." He looked at the kitchen behind me, eyes wide at the flames leaping from the sauté pans. "Are you the boss?" I smiled. "Today I am." "My mom says this is better than the food at the shelter," he whispered, as if telling me a secret. "She says it tastes like magic." I felt a prick of tears in the corners of my eyes. Hot and sudden. That is the secret ingredient. I told him. He giggled and ran back to his table. An hour later, the rush had slowed down. We had fed over 200 people. I stepped out into the dining room to check on the guests. A woman waved me over. She looked tired, her face lined with worry, but she was smiling. Beside her sat a little girl with pigtails. The little girl stood up on her chair and handed me a piece of folded construction paper. It was orange, probably from a school craft supply. "For you?" the girl said shyly. I took the paper. My hands were stained with turkey grease and flour, so I wiped them on my apron before opening it. Inside, in crayon letters that slanted up and down the page, it read, "Thank you for giving me a meal like in a Christmas movie." There was a drawing of a turkey that looked more like a brown cloud with legs, and a stick figure with a tall white hat. That was me. I stared at the drawing, like in a Christmas movie. To this little girl, sitting at a table with a white tablecloth, eating hot food that someone had plated with care, this was a fantasy. It was the kind of scene my sister Savannah staged for Instagram every day. But for this girl, it was a rare, miraculous reality. I looked at the mother. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "No, thank you," the mother replied. "You do not know what this means. To sit down and be served, to feel human for an hour." I walked back to the kitchen. Clutching the orange paper, I slid it into the breast pocket of my chef coat, right next to my heart. It sat there, a physical weight, but a light one. I thought about the reception I would have received at my parents' house today. They would have criticized my hair. They would have asked me to stay in the kitchen so I did not ruin the aesthetic. They would have treated me like a servant in my own home. Here, I was serving hundreds of people. But I was not a servant. I was a provider. I was necessary. I accepted the truth then, standing next to the dishwasher steam. My biological family might never respect me. They might never see the value in what I did. To them, I was just the help. But I had built another family. A family built on the foundation of food and respect. A family that included David at the sink, Sarah at the carving station, and that little girl with the orange paper. My manager, Leo, walked by carrying a tray of dirty glasses. He paused when he saw me staring into space. "You okay, chef?" he asked. I touched the pocket with the card. "Yeah, Leo, I am great." He grinned. "You know, looking at how you run this place, if you ever decide to open your own brand, we would all follow you. I mean it, the whole team. We would walk out and follow you anywhere." I laughed, brushing it off. "Do not tempt me, Leo." But as he walked away, my mind flashed to the laptop sitting in my locker. Inside a folder named Future, there was a file. It was a complete business plan, a concept for a community-driven dining experience. I called it Hearthline. It was detailed. It had budget projections, menu concepts, and a mission statement. Leo did not know how close to the truth he was. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3 in the afternoon. At this exact time last year, I was standing in my parents' foyer. My mother was fussing with my collar, telling me to suck in my stomach. My father was checking his watch, annoyed that the lighting was changing. Savannah was yelling at me to move out of her frame. I had felt hollow. I had felt like a prop. I looked down at my hands now. They were red from the heat. My fingernails had bits of parsley stuck under them. My hair was definitely frizzy from the steam. And I smelled strongly of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and brown butter. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of the kitchen. This was real. The heat was real. The food was real. The gratitude in that little girl's eyes was real. My family was probably sitting down to their picture-perfect dinner right now. They were probably smiling their frozen smiles for the camera, worrying about angles and lighting. They were probably relieved I was not there to ruin the shot. Let them have their photo, I thought. I looked around my kitchen, at the volunteers laughing as they scraped plates, at the steam rising from the dishwasher, at the golden light spilling in from the dining room. This was where I belonged. I checked the prep list for the evening cleanup. There was still work to do. We had to break down the stations, package the leftovers for the shelter, and scrub the floors. My back was aching, and my feet were throbbing. But for the first time in 31 years, on Thanksgiving Day, I did not feel like I was missing out on anything. I turned to the line. "All right, team," I called out. "Final push. Let us get these desserts out and make them beautiful." "Yes, chef," the chorus came back, loud and unified. I smiled. This was my table, and there was plenty of room for everyone. The pounding on my door did not sound like a visitor. It sounded like a raid. I was deep in the kind of heavy, dreamless sleep that only comes after a 16-hour shift on your feet. My body was essentially a lead weight buried under a duvet. The sun had barely cracked the horizon, painting the sky a bruised gray, and my brain was still foggy with exhaustion. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. The pounding happened again, louder this time, shaking the thin frame of the door. "Tessa, open this door right now." It was my father. His voice was muffled by the wood, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the voice he used when a supplier delivered the wrong grade of mulch for his landscaping business, or when a waiter brought him a wine that was slightly too warm. It was the voice of a man who had been inconvenienced and needed someone to pay for it. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden spike of adrenaline that tasted like copper in my mouth. For a split second, I thought something terrible had happened. I thought someone was hurt. I thought there had been an accident. I stumbled out of bed, my legs tangling in the sheets. I was wearing an oversized t-shirt that I had stolen from a brand merchandise box years ago and a pair of flannel pajama bottoms. My hair was a bird's nest of tangles, still smelling faintly of the hickory smoke from the restaurant's hearth. I didn't even have time to find my slippers. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. I expected an emergency. What I got was an invasion. My father did not wait to be invited in. He pushed past me, his shoulder checking mine, storming into my tiny living room as if he owned the building. My mother followed him, her face pinched tight with a mixture of fury and disgust as she stepped over the threshold of my apartment. Behind her was Savannah, looking impeccably groomed even at this ungodly hour, wearing a camel trench coat that probably cost more than my car. And behind them all, looking slightly bewildered but maintaining a polite distance, was Marcus Hale. It was the first time I had ever seen Savannah's fiancé in person. He was tall, wearing a navy pea coat and a scarf that looked like cashmere. He had the kind of sharp, intelligent face that usually graced the under 40 lists in business magazines. My tiny apartment, which usually felt cozy and safe, suddenly felt claustrophobic. The air, which smelled of stale coffee and my drying work clothes, was instantly polluted by their expensive perfumes and colognes. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice raspy with sleep. "Is everyone okay?" My father spun around in the middle of my living room. He looked out of place against my second-hand bookshelf and the small television I had bought on clearance. "Is everyone okay?" he mocked, his face turning a shade of red that clashed with his sweater. "You have the audacity to ask if everyone is okay after the stunt you pulled yesterday?" I rubbed my eyes, trying to wake up. What stunt? I was at work. I worked a double shift. "Don't play dumb with me, Tessa," he snapped. "Grandma called us last night in the middle of dinner. In the middle of the toast Marcus was giving to the family. She was crying. She asked why we had forbidden you from coming home for Thanksgiving." I blinked. The room was spinning slightly. I told her the truth. I said, my confusion clearing into a cold, hard realization. "You told me not to come. You said my uniform would ruin the aesthetic. You said I would disrupt the visual." "You made us look like monsters," my mother hissed, stepping forward. She was clutching her designer handbag like a weapon. "You twisted our words. We were trying to protect the image of the evening, to make it perfect for your sister. And you went crying to your grandmother to paint us as villains. You always have to be the victim, don't you, Tessa?" I stared at her. I was barefoot on my cold laminate floor, shivering slightly, while my family stood there in their winter coats, berating me for following their instructions. "I didn't cry to anyone," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "Grandma called me to ask what time I was arriving. I told her I wasn't coming because Dad asked me not to. That is literally what happened." "It is not what happened," Savannah shrieked, Her voice was high and thin, grating on my nerves. You made it sound like we kicked you out. Do you know how awkward it was? Aunt Linda kept asking where you were. Cousin Mike kept making jokes about how I must have locked you in the basement. It ruined the entire mood. I was trying to film the toast for my stories, and everyone was whispering about you. She looked at me with genuine hatred, her eyes welling up with tears that I knew were mostly performance art. You selfish brat, she spat. This was supposed to be my night, my introduction, and you made it all about your absence. You ghosted the family dinner just to make me look bad. The gaslighting was so potent I almost laughed. They had banned me. They had explicitly, verbally, and cruelly banned me. And now, because their actions had consequences, namely that people noticed I was missing, they were blaming me for not lying to cover their tracks. I looked past Savannah to Marcus. He was standing near the door, leaning against the frame. He hadn't said a word yet. He was watching the scene unfold with a look of intense concentration, his eyes darting from my shouting father to my weeping sister, and finally landing on me. He wasn't looking at me with disgust, though he was studying me. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to shield myself. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I am tired. I worked 16 hours yesterday feeding 300 people who actually wanted me there. If you are here to yell at me for not lying to Grandma, you can do it over the phone later. Please get out of my apartment. You do not talk to me like that, my father shouted, taking a step toward me. I pay for your car insurance. I am the reason you even have this. I cut him off. You stopped paying my car insurance 6 years ago. Dad, and I pay my own rent. You have no power here. He stopped, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He wasn't used to me fighting back. Usually, I just took it. Usually, I just apologized for existing and tried to make myself smaller. But I wasn't small today. I was Chef Rios. I had run a kitchen. I had commanded a brigade. I had fed the hungry. My mother scoffed, looking around my apartment with a sneer. Look at this place. It smells like a campfire in here. And look at you. You look like a mess. This is exactly why we didn't want you there. Tessa, you have no respect for presentation. You have no respect for class. Savannah wiped her eyes, checking her reflection in the mirror by the door. Honestly, it is embarrassing, she muttered. I told Marcus you were probably just hungover or something. I had to make up excuses all night. Marcus took a step forward then. The movement was small, but it commanded attention. The room went quiet, mostly because my family was terrified of offending him. He walked past my father, past my mother, and stopped about 3 feet away from me. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, something crisp, like cedar and expensive gin. He wasn't looking at my messy hair or my old t-shirt. He was looking at my hands. I instinctively tried to hide them. They were rough. There was a fresh burn on my forearm from a roasting pan, a red welt that was still healing. My knuckles were dry and cracked from washing them 100 times the day before. Wait, Marcus said. His voice was low, a deep baritone that vibrated in the small room. He looked up from my hands to my face. He squinted slightly, as if trying to see through a fog. Then his eyes dropped to the pocket of the oversized flannel shirt I had thrown on over my t-shirt when I opened the door. Sticking out of the pocket was the corner of the orange construction paper card the little girl had given me yesterday. The bright, childish color stood out against the gray fabric. You smell like hickory, Marcus said. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. My mother let out a nervous laugh. Oh, Marcus, I am so sorry. I told you. She works in a kitchen. The smell just clings to her. It is dreadful. We know. Marcus held up a hand to silence her. He didn't look away from me. Hickory, he repeated, and rosemary, and, is that brown butter? I frowned, stepping back slightly. I work at a restaurant. That is what kitchens smell like. He looked at the burn on my arm again. Then he looked at my eyes. He was searching for something, putting pieces of a puzzle together in real time. You are Tessa, he said. Yes, I said slowly. I am Tessa. We just established that. No, he said, shaking his head slightly. "You are Tessa Rios." He said my full name with a strange emphasis, as if it meant something more than just a label for Savannah's sister. My father stepped in, trying to regain control of the room. "Yes, Marcus, this is Tessa. We are apologizing for her behavior. She is the black sheep, as you can see." Marcus ignored him completely. He took another step toward me, his eyes widening. "Last November," he said, speaking quickly now, "in Denver, the Fable Harbor Charity Gala for the Children's Hospital." I froze. The room suddenly felt very cold. My family looked confused. They had no idea what he was talking about. They didn't know I had been in Denver last November. They thought I was on a camping trip with friends. I stayed silent, but my reaction gave me away. My breath hitched. Marcus continued, his voice gaining intensity. "We had hired a celebrity chef from New York. He had a meltdown 3 hours before service. Walked out, took his sous chefs with him. We had 200 guests arriving. Donors who were paying $5,000 a plate. We were looking at a disaster. The PR nightmare alone would have tanked the quarter." He was staring at me intensely now. Then, Willow and Ember sent over a loaner. He said, "They said they had a sous chef who happened to be in the city for a conference. They said she could handle the line." I looked down at the floor. I remembered that night vividly. The panic in the kitchen, the servers crying in the alley, the way I had walked in, thrown away the celebrity chef's overly complicated prep list, and written a new menu on a whiteboard in 10 minutes. "We didn't catch her name at the time," Marcus said, turning slightly to address the room, but keeping his eyes on me. It was chaos. She came in like a hurricane. She didn't speak to anyone. She just put on an apron and started shouting orders. She reorganized the entire line. She rewrote the menu based on what was in the walk-in. He turned back to me. "Braised short ribs with a coffee chili reduction," he recited, "parsnip puree, and a dark chocolate tart with sea salt for dessert." My mother looked back and forth between us, her mouth open. "What are you talking about? Marcus? Tessa cooks burgers." Marcus laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. "Burgers, Linda. That meal saved a 7-figure contract with the hospital network. If that dinner had failed, Fable Harbor would have lost the partnership." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a slim leather wallet. From inside, he extracted a folded piece of heavy cardstock. It was creased and worn, as if it had been unfolded and refolded many times. He opened it. It was a dinner menu, printed on simple paper, likely from the office printer in the back of the hotel. Down at the bottom, scrawled in black marker, were the initials TR. He held it up. "I kept this," he said. "I kept it to remind my operations team what actual competence looks like. I have been trying to find the chef who ran that kitchen for a year. The agency just said it was a favor from Willow and Ember and wouldn't give me a name." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw awe in his face. "You are her," he said. "You are the ghost chef." I finally met his gaze. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Once. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush furniture. My father looked like someone had just spoken to him in a language he didn't understand. His face was a mask of confusion. He looked at Marcus, then at me, the daughter in the messy pajamas, the daughter he had banned from his table, and he couldn't make the connection. "But," my mother stammered, "that is impossible. Tessa is just a sous chef. She doesn't run things." Marcus turned on her, and his expression was no longer polite. It was sharp. "Just a sous chef?" he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what it takes to run a brigade in a crisis? Do you have any idea the level of skill required to execute a 3-course meal for 200 high-net-worth individuals with 0 prep time?" He gestured to me. "Your daughter is a virtuoso," he said, "and you banned her from Thanksgiving because she didn't match your napkins?" Savannah let out a small, strangled sound. "But, Marcus, you are supposed to be looking at me. Why are we talking about her? She smells like smoke." Marcus looked at Savannah. It was a long, measuring look. It was the look of a man seeing something clearly for the first time, and not liking what he found. She smells like a wood-fired hearth. Savannah, he said coldly. It is the smell of a Michelin star kitchen. It is the smell of success. He turned back to me, shaking his head as if trying to clear a hallucination. I don't understand, he said, and his voice was genuinely pained. I have been talking about finding this chef for months. I have told this story at board meetings. I have told this story to you. Savannah. He looked at my parents, his eyes narrowing. Why? He asked. Why did no one tell me that Savannah's sister is Tessa Rios? My father cleared his throat, adjusting his collar nervously. Well, we didn't know. We didn't know about Denver. Tessa doesn't tell us these things. She is very secretive. I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound that surprised even me. Secretive? I said, stepping forward. I called you the night I got back from Denver. Dad, I tried to tell you about the gala. I tried to tell you I saved the service. Do you know what you said? He stared at me, his face pale. You told me to hurry up because Savannah was live streaming her haul from the mall. I said, you told me that my little cooking stories were boring. The room went deadly silent again. Marcus looked at my father. He looked at the man he had been trying to impress, the man he was supposed to call father-in-law, and I saw the respect evaporate from his eyes like water on a hot pan. He turned back to me. He looked at the card in my pocket again. That card, he said softly. Is that from yesterday? I touched the orange paper. Yes. From the community dinner? He asked. The one I read about in the local paper? Yes, I said. You ran that? I nodded. I am the lead chef for the initiative. Marcus let out a long breath. He looked around my small apartment, seeing it with new eyes. He didn't see a messy, cheap flat anymore. He saw the humble home of a master craftsman who was unappreciated by the people who should have been her biggest fans. This is... He trailed off, searching for the word. Then he looked at my parents. This is insane. My mother tried to recover. She put on her best socialite smile, though it faltered at the corners. Oh, Marcus, do not be dramatic. It is just food. We are happy Tessa has found her little niche. But really, we came here to discuss the family dynamic. Little niche? Marcus repeated. He looked at me, and a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a business smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a diamond in a landfill. Tessa, he said, ignoring my mother completely, I have a problem, a big problem, and looking at you, I think I just found the solution. Savannah stepped between us, sensing the spotlight shifting away from her. Marcus, we are late for brunch with your partners. We need to go. Tessa can apologize later. Marcus didn't move. He didn't even look at her. Wait a minute, Savannah, he said. He was looking at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. My Christmas caterer canceled on me yesterday. He said to me, for the engagement party, the one Savannah has been planning for 6 months. I saw my parents stiffen. They knew this. It was the disaster they had been whispering about all morning. We are scrambling, Marcus continued. We have press coming. We have investors coming. It is going to be a humiliation. He took a step closer to me. Unless, he said, unless I can convince the chef who saved me in Denver to do it again. My father's eyes lit up. I saw the gears turning in his head. He saw a way out. He saw a way to save face, save money, and use me all at the same time. Oh, he exclaimed, clapping his hands together. Well, that is a wonderful idea. Tessa would love to help. Wouldn't you? Tessa, it is for family, after all. My mother jumped in, her voice sickly sweet. Of course she would. It is the least she can do after ruining yesterday. Savannah looked torn between hating the idea of me being involved and needing the party to be perfect. She settled for a pout. Well, if she cleans up, and wears a mask so no one smells her, I guess she can work in the back. They were doing it again. They were talking about me like I was a piece of equipment, like I was a blender they had found in the back of the cupboard. But Marcus wasn't looking at them. He was waiting for my answer. I looked at my father, who was nodding encouragingly, as if he hadn't just screamed at me 5 minutes ago. I looked at my mother, who was already mentally redecorating my kitchen. I looked at Savannah, who was checking her nails. And then I looked at Marcus. He knew. He knew exactly who I was. And for the first time in my life, someone in this room held the cards, and it wasn't my parents. It was me. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You want to hire me?" I asked Marcus. "Yes," he said without hesitation. I looked at my father. "For family?" I asked. Yes, my father said, relieved. "For family." I looked back at Marcus. "I am very expensive," I said softly. Marcus grinned. "I am counting on it." The silence that followed Marcus's declaration was heavy, thick, and suffocating. It hung in the air of my small living room like smoke from a grease fire. My father stood there, his mouth slightly open, blinking rapidly as his brain tried to recalibrate the narrative he had spent 30 years constructing. He was a businessman, a man used to pivoting when a deal went south, but this was a maneuver that required a level of flexibility bordering on the acrobatic. He looked at Marcus, the wealthy, influential man he was desperate to impress, and then he looked at me, the daughter he had just screamed at for breathing wrong. Then, the pivot happened. It was visceral. I watched his posture soften. I watched the redness fade from his cheeks, replaced by a practiced, ingratiating smile. He let out a short, breathy laugh, waving his hand dismissively as if the last 10 minutes of verbal abuse had just been a quirky misunderstanding. "Well," he said, his voice dropping into a jovial, conspiratorial register. "You see, Marcus, that is just Tessa. We did not want to brag." He took a step toward me, reaching out to pat my shoulder. I flinched, stepping back, but he ignored the rejection. "Tessa has always been private," he continued, nodding as if agreeing with himself. "She knows her way around a kitchen. Of course, we always knew she had talent. We just did not want to make a big deal out of it. You know how it is. We wanted her to stay grounded. My mother, never one to miss a cue, jumped onto the life raft my father had just inflated. She smoothed the front of her coat, her expression shifting from disgust to a sickly sweet maternal pride that made my stomach churn. "Exactly," she chimed in. She looked at Marcus with wide, innocent eyes. "We raised our girls to be humble. Tessa is so modest. She never tells us about her little victories. We had no idea she was the one who saved your gala. But honestly, it does not surprise me. She has always been a worker." I stared at them. My jaw actually ached from how hard I was clenching my teeth. 10 minutes ago, my work was an embarrassment. 10 minutes ago, I smelled like a campfire and looked like a disaster. Now, suddenly, my career was a testament to their excellent parenting. They were rewriting history in real time, painting over the cracks with a fresh coat of lies. Savannah was the only one not smiling. She was vibrating with a toxic mix of jealousy and panic. She looked at Marcus, who was still looking at me with that intense, calculating expression, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She was losing the room. She was losing the narrative. For the first time in her life, the spotlight was drifting toward the sister she kept in the shadows. She needed to get it back, and Savannah only knew one way to elevate herself: by stepping on me. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on my father, then Marcus, and finally settling on me with a predatory gleam. A light bulb went on behind her perfectly applied false lashes. "Oh my God!" she squealed, clapping her hands together. The sound was sharp and jarring in the small space. "This is perfect!" She turned to Marcus, grabbing his arm and pulling his attention away from me. "Babe, do you not see? This solves everything." Marcus looked down at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Solves what, Savannah?" "The Christmas engagement party," she announced, beaming. My stomach dropped. The Christmas engagement party. It was the event of the season in our family. Savannah and my parents had been planning it for 6 months. It was going to be held at the new estate Savannah and Marcus were moving into. They had invited 300 people. They had invited press from Chicago. They had invited every major influencer in the tri-state area. It was less of a party and more of a coronation. And I knew. because my mother had complained about it incessantly in the group chat, that they were in trouble. The caterer, a high-end firm from the city, had canceled on them yesterday afternoon due to a scheduling error, a double booking. My mother had been spiraling about it, threatening to sue them, threatening to ruin their reputation, but threats did not put food on plates. "That is a brilliant idea," Savannah continued, talking fast, her excitement mounting as she realized she could turn this problem into a win. "Since the caterer bailed on us, Tessa can do it." She turned to me, her smile wide and empty. "It is perfect, Tess. You are already family, so we do not have to worry about contracts or deposits or any of that boring legal stuff. And since Marcus says you are actually good, you can handle the menu." My father's eyes lit up. He looked like a man who had just found a winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk. "Of course," he boomed. "That is the solution. It keeps it in the family. It is personal. It is intimate. The press will eat it up. The sister of the bride, cooking the engagement dinner. It is a heartwarming story." My mother nodded vigorously, "And it saves us so much hassle with vetting a new company this close to the date. Tessa, you would be saving the day. Again." They were closing in on me. I felt like a deer standing on the highway, watching the headlights get closer and closer. Savannah pulled her phone out of her pocket, tapping furiously on the screen. "Okay, so here's the vision," she said, not asking if I agreed, but simply assigning tasks. "The theme is European coastal chic. Think Amalfi Coast meets the French Riviera, but in winter, so lots of seafood, but warm." She looked up at me, her expression deadly serious. "We need 9 or 10 courses, small plates, tasting menu style. It needs to be visually stunning. Tessa, every single plate has to be Instagrammable. If people do not take a picture of it before they eat it, it is a failure." She started listing requirements, counting them off on her manicured fingers. "I want oysters, but not just on ice. They need to be smoking or glowing or something. I want a lobster course. I want truffles, white truffles, not the cheap black ones. And for dessert, I want something interactive, like a chocolate sphere that melts when you pour gold sauce on it. Can you do gold sauce?" She did not wait for an answer. "And obviously, you will need to handle the table decor too, because the food has to match the centerpieces. I sent you the mood board on Pinterest last week. Did you see it? It is very beige and cream, so no red sauces, nothing that stains." I stood there, listening to the list of demands grow longer and more absurd. 9 or 10 courses for 300 people, high-end ingredients, interactive desserts, decor coordination, and she wanted it in 3 weeks. This was a job that would cost a client $50,000, minimum, just for the labor and expertise. That did not even include the food cost. And then came the kicker, the part I knew was coming. My father rubbed his hands together. "We will cover the cost of the groceries." "Obviously," he said, as if he was being incredibly generous. "Just send the receipts to your mother." "And the fee?" I asked. My voice was quiet, steady. The room went silent again. Savannah laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Fee?" she asked, tilting her head. "Tessa, it is my engagement party. It is your gift to us." My mother nodded. "Family helps family. Tessa, we are giving you a massive platform. Do you know who is coming to this party? The editor of Chicago Style is on the guest list. This is exposure you could never afford on your own. I will make sure Savannah tags you in every single story." Exposure, the currency of the desperate. They were asking me to work 100 hours of labor, to design a Michelin-level menu, to manage a staff I would presumably have to find myself, and to execute a high-pressure service for 300 VIPs. And they expected me to do it for a tag on Instagram. I looked at them. I looked at my father, who had banned me from Thanksgiving yesterday because I smelled like work. I looked at my mother, who had told me not to touch her furniture. I looked at Savannah, who had spent her life treating me like a background extra in the movie of her life. They did not see a professional chef standing in front of them. They saw a servant. They saw a way to get what they wanted without paying for it. They saw a problem that had fixed itself. I felt a familiar heat rising in my chest. It was the same heat I felt when a ticket machine started printing non-stop during a Friday night rush. It was pressure, but it was also clarity. I looked over at Marcus. He had not said a word during their pitch. He was leaning against the wall near the door. His arms crossed over his chest. He was watching me. He wasn't looking at my family. He was watching my hands. My right hand was in the pocket of my flannel shirt. My fingers curled tightly around the orange construction paper card the little girl had given me. I was squeezing it so hard the edges were digging into my palm. Marcus saw the tension in my jaw. He saw the way my shoulders had locked. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew the industry. He knew what they were asking was exploitative. He knew that exposure did not pay rent. But he did not step in. He did not save me. He waited. He wanted to see what I would do. I took a deep breath. The air in my apartment still smelled of stale coffee, but underneath that, it smelled of the hickory smoke clinging to my hair. It smelled of me. "What if I refuse?" I asked. The question hung in the air, sharp and unexpected. My father's smile dropped instantly. The jovial businessman vanished, replaced by the cold, hard disciplinarian. "Refuse?" he repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "Why would you refuse?" "I have a job." "Dad," I said, "I run a kitchen. December is the busiest month of the year. I do not have time to plan a 10-course banquet for free." My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "For free? Tessa, is that all you care about? Money? This is your sister's happiness." My father stepped closer, invading my personal space again. He used his height to try and intimidate me, a tactic that had worked when I was 12. Family does not turn their backs on each other. "Tessa," he growled, "we are in a bind. The caterer canceled. We need you. If you turn this down, you are being incredibly selfish. After everything we have done for you, after we raised you, put a roof over your head." Savannah started to tear up on cue. "I knew you were jealous." She sniffed. "You have always been jealous of me. You just want to ruin my big day because you are miserable and alone." The guilt trip was a symphony, conducted by 3 masters of the art. They hit every note: duty, obligation, shame, pity. They were banking on the old Tessa, the Tessa who just wanted to be included, the Tessa who would light herself on fire just to keep them warm, hoping that maybe, just once, they would say thank you. But the old Tessa wasn't here. The old Tessa had died yesterday morning in a parking lot when her father told her she was too ugly for a photograph. I looked at Marcus again. His expression hadn't changed, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a challenge. I looked back at my father. "You are right," I said softly. The tension in the room broke instantly. My father let out a long sigh, his shoulders dropping. My mother smiled, a triumphant, smug little thing. "I knew you would come around," my father said, clapping his hand on my shoulder again. "You are a good girl. Tessa." Deep down. Savannah instantly stopped crying. She pulled up her phone again. "Great. So, I will add you to the planning board. We need a tasting menu by Tuesday. And Tessa, seriously, no red sauce." She didn't say thank you. She didn't ask if I had the time. She just issued orders and moved on, assuming my compliance was a natural law of the universe. They turned to leave. Their mission accomplished. They had secured their free labor. They had secured their prestige. They had put me back in my box. Or so they thought. I stood there, watching them file out of my apartment. I felt a strange calmness settling over me. It wasn't the calmness of surrender. It was the calmness of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. I hadn't agreed because I felt guilty. I hadn't agreed because I wanted their approval. I agreed because they had just handed me the keys to the castle. They were giving me a stage. They were giving me an audience of the most important people in the industry, and they were giving me total control over the single most important event of their social lives. They wanted a show? I was going to give them a show. As they walked out the door, Marcus paused. He let Savannah walk past him into the hallway. He turned back to look at me one last time. He didn't look relieved. He looked curious. He looked like a man who had just watched someone swallow a grenade and was waiting to see when they would pull the pin. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a beaten dog. It was the look of a chef who had just sharpened her favorite knife. He gave me a curt nod, a silent acknowledgement of the game that had just begun, and then he turned to follow my sister. My mother was the last one out. She stopped in the doorway, looking me up and down with critical eyes. She took in my flannel pajamas, my messy hair, my bare feet. "Oh, and Tessa," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "On the day of the party, please do not wear your uniform. We want you to mingle a little bit, assuming you are not too sweaty." She smirked. "Try to wear something that fits the class of the event, something that shows you belong in Marcus's world, even if we all know you are just visiting." She waited for me to look ashamed. She waited for me to tug at my clothes or apologize for my appearance. Instead, I smiled at her. It was a sharp, jagged smile. "Don't worry. Mom," I said. My voice was steady, projecting clearly into the hallway. "I will wear exactly what suits my position." She frowned, not quite understanding the tone, but she didn't have time to parse it. She turned and clicked her heels down the hallway, chasing after the perfection she worshipped. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I stood in the silence of my apartment. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the file labeled Hearthline. I opened a new document. At the top of the page, I typed, "Engagement Dinner Protocol." They wanted European coastal chic. They wanted interactive desserts. They wanted a spectacle. I cracked my knuckles. I was going to give them a dinner they would never, ever forget. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. It rang twice. "Willow and Ember, Prep Kitchen," a voice answered. "Leo," I said, "it's Tessa." "Hey, chef," Leo said, sounding surprised. "You are not on the schedule today. Everything okay?" "I need a favor," I said. "Actually, I need a lot of favors. I need the contact info for the specialty seafood purveyor in Chicago, the one who charges triple for rush orders, and I need to know if the team is interested in some freelance work." Leo paused. "What kind of work?" "High stakes," I said. "High profile. And we are going to bill it as a consulting fee for my personal brand." There was a silence on the line, and then I could hear the smile in Leo's voice. "We are in. Chef, when do we start?" "Right now," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the bus pass on my desk, then at the orange card from the little girl. My family thought they had hired a servant. They didn't realize they had just hired an executioner. And the first course was going to be revenge, served ice cold. The lock clicked into place with a sound that felt final, like the closing of a heavy book. I leaned my forehead against the cool painted wood of the door and let out a long, steady breath. It was not a sigh of resignation. It was not the shaky exhale of a daughter who had just been bullied into submission. It was the release of a sniper who had been holding her breath for the perfect shot, and who now realized the target had just walked directly into the crosshairs. My parents and Savannah thought they had just manipulated me. They thought they had successfully shamed the black sheep into working for free to save their public image. They walked away thinking they were the ones holding the leash. They had no idea. I walked back into my living room. The air still smelled faintly of my mother's cloying floral perfume and my father's expensive aftershave, a lingering reminder of their intrusion. I walked to the window and cracked it open, letting the biting November wind scour the room clean. Then I went to my desk and sat down. I woke up my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the messy stack of cookbooks and the bus pass that served as my bookmark. I opened a secure folder on my hard drive. It was password protected, a little digital vault that contained the truth my family was too self-absorbed to see. They thought I was just a sous chef. They thought I was an hourly employee who flipped burgers and chopped onions for a paycheck that barely covered rent. That was the narrative they needed to believe because it fit their worldview. Savannah was the star, and Tessa was the help. The document on my screen told a different story. It was a shareholder agreement. 2 years ago, The original owner of Willow and Ember had tried to sell the restaurant to a corporate chain that wanted to turn it into a soulless franchise. I had threatened to quit. I had told him that if he sold, I would walk, and I would take the entire kitchen staff with me. The investors panicked. They knew the food was the only reason the place was profitable. To keep me, they didn't just give me a raise, they gave me equity. I owned 40% of Willow and Ember. I wasn't just an employee, I was a partner. I signed the checks. I approved the budgets. When the restaurant made a profit, I made a profit. That tiny apartment my mother sneered at? I lived there by choice because I was pouring every spare dollar into my investment portfolio and my savings. But that wasn't the only secret in the folder. I clicked on another file. It was a consulting contract for a boutique hotel in Chicago, then another for a resort in Aspen. For the last 3 years, I had been working as a ghost consultant for hospitality groups. When a high-end restaurant was failing, when the food cost was too high, or the menu lacked identity, they called me. I came in, usually under a non-disclosure agreement, fixed the kitchen, trained the staff, and left before anyone knew I was there. That was how I ended up in Denver last year for Fable Harbor. It wasn't a loner favor as Marcus had thought. I was hired by the board to audit the efficiency of their gala service. I just ended up cooking because the head chef had a nervous breakdown. I leaned back in my chair, watching the cursor blink. Marcus Hale. He was the missing piece of the puzzle. As the strategic advisor for Fable Harbor, he was the one who vetted new investments. He was the one looking for the next big thing to put the company's money behind. I opened my email archive and searched for Hale. There it was, a single email from a year ago, sent to the generic consulting inbox I used. To whom it may concern. Please extend my personal gratitude to the chef who stepped in tonight. The short ribs were not just good food, they were an honest experience. In an industry built on smoke and mirrors, it is rare to taste something real. We would like to know who she is. I had never replied. I was bound by the non-disclosure agreement, and honestly, I didn't want the attention. But now the landscape had changed. Marcus wasn't just an empty suit like the men my father usually did business with. He cared about the product. He cared about authenticity. He had looked at my burned hands and seen competence, not ugliness. I minimized the email and opened my master plan. The file was titled Hearthline. It was a pitch deck for a new restaurant concept, my concept, community-driven dining, long tables, local sourcing, a place where the barrier between the kitchen and the dining room was dissolved, a place where the chef served the food and the guests passed plates to one another, high-end technique, but with the soul of a family dinner. It was everything my parents hated. It was everything I loved. The business plan was complete. I had the location scouted, an old brick warehouse down by the river. I had the team ready to jump ship with me. The only thing I was missing was the capital. I needed a seed investor who understood that hospitality was about human connection, not just profit margins. I needed someone like Marcus Hale. I sat there for a long moment, the fan of my laptop humming in the quiet room. The engagement party wasn't just a chore anymore. It wasn't just a way to get my family off my back. It was an audition. It was a live demonstration of my capabilities, performed for the one man who could make my dream a reality. If I pulled this off, if I executed a flawless 10-course concept dinner under impossible conditions, Marcus would see exactly what I could do. But this time, I wasn't going to do it as Tessa the daughter. I wasn't going to do it as the doormat. I was going to do it as a business partner. I made a decision then and there. This Christmas was a test, not for me, but for them. I had 2 plans. Plan A, I execute the dinner, I blow their minds. If they treat me with respect, if they acknowledge my contribution, if they act like a family even for one night, then maybe we can find a new normal. I will keep my distance, but I won't burn the bridge. Plan B, if they treat me like help, if they sideline me, if they use me to prop up Savannah's vanity while sneering at my uniform, then I am done. I will cut the cord. I will take Marcus aside, pitch him Hearthline, and leave my family behind in the beige, soulless world they created. I cracked my knuckles and started typing. I wasn't writing a grocery list. I was writing a contract. I pulled up a template I used for my consulting gigs. I filled in the client names, Savannah Rios and Marcus Hale. Then I started listing the terms. Item 1. Cost of goods. I estimated the food cost for a 10-course tasting menu for 300 people. Truffles, lobster, prime beef, gold leaf. It was going to be astronomical. I put the estimated total in bold. Item 2. Labor fee. My father thought I was free. He was wrong. I typed in my standard consulting rate. It was $200 an hour. I estimated 50 hours of prep and execution. That was $10,000. I stared at the number. I knew they would scream. I knew they would call me greedy. But this wasn't about the money. It was about value. If they didn't pay for it, they wouldn't respect it. Item 3. Attribution. The chef, Tessa Rios, retains all intellectual property rights to the menu. The chef's name and title must be printed on all physical menus. The chef must be tagged and credited in all social media posts featuring the food. Item 4. Cancellation policy. If the client interferes with the kitchen operations, changes the menu within 48 hours of the event, or fails to provide the agreed-upon kitchen equipment, the chef reserves the right to withdraw services immediately. I read it over. It was cold. It was professional. It was devoid of emotion. I saved the file as a PDF. I opened a new email draft. I typed my parents' email addresses in the recipient line. I CC'd Savannah, and then, after a moment of hesitation, I CC'd Marcus. Subject: Culinary proposal for Savannah Rios engagement event from Tessa Rios, chef and co-owner, Willow and Ember Food Group. I typed the body of the email. Dear Savannah, Mom, and Dad, following our discussion this morning, I have put together a formal proposal for the catering services required for the engagement party on December 24th. Attached, you will find the scope of work, the estimated budget for ingredients, and my professional fee schedule. Given the short timeline and the complexity of the menu requested, I will need this agreement signed and the deposit for food costs transferred by close of business tomorrow. Please note that as this is a professional engagement taking place during the peak holiday season, I am treating this with the same rigorous standards I apply to all my clients. This ensures the quality and execution will meet the high expectations of your guests. I look forward to working with you to make this event a success. Best regards. Tessa Rios, Executive Sous Chef and Co-owner, Willow and Ember. I hovered my mouse over the send button. This was it. This was the moment I stopped being the little girl waiting for a pat on the head. They wanted me to play a role? Fine, but I was writing the script. I thought about my father's voice saying, "You are being incredibly selfish." I thought about my mother saying, "Try to wear something that fits the class of the event." I thought about Savannah saying, "No red sauce." I pressed send. The whoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I sat back and looked at the clock on the wall. It was still early morning. The sun had fully risen now, casting a harsh, revealing light on the dust motes dancing in the air. There were exactly 3 weeks until Christmas Eve. 3 weeks for them to prove they saw me as a human being. 3 weeks for them to prove they valued me beyond what I could produce for them. I closed my laptop with a snap. If they chose to treat me like a tool, they were going to be very surprised when I pulled the plug and left them in the dark. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt dangerous. My phone buzzed on the desk. Then it buzzed again. Then a third time. The replies were starting to come in. I didn't turn around. I ground my coffee beans, the noise loud and grinding, drowning out the sound of my family realizing that the game had changed. Let them panic. I had a menu to write. The digital fallout from my email was immediate, violent, and exactly what I had expected. I had barely finished pouring my coffee when my phone began to vibrate across the laminate surface of my desk. It was not a polite buzz. It was an angry, sustained rattle. My father was calling. I took a sip of coffee, black and bitter. Before I swiped the green icon, I put him on speakerphone and set the device back down. I did not want to hold his rage against my ear. Tessa, his voice boomed, distorted by the speaker but unmistakably furious. I am looking at this email. I am looking at this ridiculous document you sent us. Is this a joke? Good morning, Dad, I said, keeping my voice level. I assume you received the proposal. Proposal? He sputtered. This is an extortion note. You are charging the family? You are charging us $10,000 for a labor fee? I leaned back in my chair. Crossing my legs, I am charging you my standard consulting rate. Dad, actually, I gave you a slight discount. My corporate rate is usually $250 an hour for holiday rush work. I billed you at $200. There was a sputtering sound on the line, like an engine failing to turn over. I cannot believe this, he shouted. After everything we have done for you? We raised you. Tessa, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. We fed you. We clothed you. And now you have the audacity to send us a bill for cooking a dinner for your sister? I closed my eyes for a second, centering myself. I had rehearsed this conversation in the shower 100 times over the last decade. Dad, I said, cutting through his tirade, you are not asking me to cook a potluck casserole. You are asking me to cater a high-end, 10-course banquet for 300 people with 3 weeks of notice. You are asking for professional services. If you hired the firm that canceled on you, their labor cost would be double what I am asking. That is different, he argued. They are a business. You are our daughter. In this context, I am a vendor, I replied coldly. You made that very clear yesterday when you told me I did not fit the image of the family. If I am not family enough to sit at the table, then I am professional enough to charge for the food on it. He went silent. I had cornered him with his own cruelty. You are being petty, he growled, his voice dropping to a menacing low. You are doing this to punish us. I am doing this because I am a business owner. I said, the contract is standard. If you want the menu Savannah requested, you need to sign it and wire the deposit for the ingredients by 5 o'clock today. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee the sourcing for the white truffles. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. 5 minutes later, the attack shifted fronts. My mother entered the battlefield via text message. Her strategy was less aggressive but far more insidious. She went for the emotional jugular. Tessa, I am sitting here crying. I do not understand what happened to my sweet girl. Do you hate us that much? Your father is heartbroken. He just wants to give Savannah a perfect day. Can you not find it in your heart to do this as a gift? We are family. Money should not come between us. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She painted herself as the victim and me as the cold-hearted villain destroying domestic bliss. I didn't type a paragraph of defense. I didn't apologize. Instead, I opened my files and took a screenshot of a contract I had signed last year with a boutique hotel chain. I redacted the client name, but I left the numbers visible. The bottom line showed a consulting fee of $25,000 for a weekend menu overhaul. I sent the image to her. This is what the market pays me. Mom, I typed, I am not asking for charity. I am asking for respect. If you want a professional outcome, you pay professional rates. Also, please remind Dad that the truffle supplier needs a 40% deposit up front. She didn't reply. I saw the 3 dots appear, dance for a moment, and then vanish. She realized that guilt didn't work on someone who had already been cast out. Then came Savannah. The group chat, which usually consisted of Savannah posting photos of her outfits and my mother sending heart emojis, suddenly lit up. I honestly cannot believe you. Savannah wrote, I am trying to give you a platform. Do you have any idea how many followers I have now? I was going to tag you in everything. I was going to put your name on the menu cards. That exposure is worth way more than $10,000. You should be thanking me for letting you be involved. I stared at the screen. The delusion was breathtaking. She truly believed that her Instagram stories were a currency stronger than the US dollar. She truly believed that I, an owner of a profitable restaurant, needed her charity to be relevant. I typed back slowly, making sure every word was precise. Savannah, I co-own a restaurant that is fully booked 6 weeks in advance. My food has been reviewed in the Tribune. I do not need exposure, I need a deposit. And frankly, my food has appeared in enough magazines without a filter. You just worry about finding a filter that makes your apology to the guests look sincere if you do not sign this contract. I put the phone down. The silence that followed lasted for 6 hours. I went to the restaurant, I worked the lunch service, I expedited tickets, yelled at the dishwasher to pick up the pace, and tasted sauces. I let the rhythm of the kitchen wash over me. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from DocuSign. Document signed, Rios Engagement Event Agreement. I opened it. My father's signature was scrawled angrily at the bottom of the page. A second notification from my bank app popped up. A wire transfer for the ingredient deposit had been initiated. They had caved. They didn't sign it because they respected me. They didn't sign it because they loved me. They signed it because they were trapped. They had already paid a non-refundable deposit on the photographer and the videographer. They had already told the magazine editor that the dinner was happening. If they canceled now, they wouldn't just lose money, they would lose face. And in the Rios family, losing face was a fate worse than death. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I had forced them to acknowledge my value, even if they hated me for it. Then, another email came through. I assumed it was my mother sending a passive-aggressive follow-up about the tablecloths, but when I looked at the sender, my breath caught in my throat. It was from Marcus Hale. It was sent to my personal email, not the group thread. Subject: Logistics Insanity Check. Tessa. I just saw the signed contract come through. I wanted to reach out personally, away from the noise of the group chat. I know my future in-laws can be intense. I sat in the living room while they debated your proposal. I want you to know that I pushed them to sign it. You are a professional, and you deserve to be paid. The exposure argument Savannah uses is nonsense, and I told her as much. I understand that the pressure from your family can be terrible. If you need any support with logistics, sourcing, or if you just need someone to run interference so you can actually cook, tell me. I want this dinner to succeed, but I don't want it to come at the cost of your sanity. Best, Marcus. I read the email twice. It was the first time anyone adjacent to my family had ever acknowledged that the dynamic was toxic. Marcus wasn't blind. He was seeing the cracks in the porcelain. He was seeing the gap between the perfect family Savannah projected and the messy, manipulative reality. He was standing on a bridge between two worlds. On one side was Savannah and her curated image. On the other side was me and the hard, cold truth. He wasn't crossing over yet, but he was looking. I decided to test the waters. I hit reply. Marcus. Thank you. That means a lot. The contract is just business, but the execution is going to be difficult. Since Fable Harbor is technically an investor in the lifestyle you are marrying into, I think we should treat this as a partnership. I am doing a menu test tomorrow night at Willow and Ember. Just a few concepts for the main courses. The restaurant is closed to the public on Mondays, but I will be there prepping. If you want to come by and taste what you're paying for, you are welcome. Consider it a partner meeting. Tessa. I didn't expect him to come. He was a busy man. He had a company to run and a wedding to plan. But he replied in 3 minutes. I will be there at 7. The next evening, Willow and Ember was quiet. The front of house lights were off, leaving only the ambient glow of the street lamps filtering through the large windows. The kitchen, however, was bright and warm. I was alone. I had told my staff to take the night off. I wanted this to be just me and the food. I had prepared 3 dishes, a scallop crudo with a citrus chili oil and shaved radish, a braised short-rib tortellini with a parsnip foam, and a deconstructed lemon meringue tart that looked like a piece of modern art. At 7 o'clock exactly, there was a knock on the glass front door. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked out to unlock it. Marcus was standing there in a wool coat, looking out of place on the empty sidewalk. Hey, I said, holding the door open. Hi, he said, stepping inside. He looked around the empty dining room. Nice place. It feels real. It is real, I said, locking the door behind him. Come on back to the kitchen. That is where the heat is. He followed me to the chef's counter, a high-top table right next to the pass where we usually served VIP guests. I poured him a glass of wine, a crisp, mineral-heavy white that paired with the scallops. I didn't make small talk. I didn't ask about Savannah. I just started plating. I set the scallop dish in front of him. Dayboat scallops, I said, citrus oil, serrano chili, eat it in one bite. He picked up his fork, he ate, he closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked at me. This is incredible, he said quietly. I turned back to the stove to drop the pasta. Why did you come? Marcus? I asked, my back to him. You didn't have to. You could have just let my parents handle me. I heard him set his glass down. I came because I wanted to see if the Denver dinner was a fluke, he said, and because I am confused. I plated the tortellini, spooning the foam over the top with precision. I turned and placed it in front of him. Confused about what? I asked. About why they treat you like a secret, he said. He cut into the pasta. About why Savannah acts like your job is something to be ashamed of. I look at this. He gestured to the food, to the kitchen. And I see excellence. I see someone at the top of their game. Why do they see a servant? I leaned against the stainless steel counter, crossing my arms. Because I do not fit the picture, I said. My parents spent 30 years building a frame. It is a frame made of perfection, of appearances, of being effortless. Savannah fits inside it perfectly. She smiles. She poses. She pretends. I work. I sweat. I have burns on my arms. I am the messy reality that proves the effortless life is a lie. Marcus took a bite of the short rib. He chewed slowly, savoring the depth of the flavor. He looked up at me, his expression serious. If they do not trample over each other to brag about you, he said, his voice low, then they are fools. They are sitting on a gold mine of talent, and they are trying to bury it in the backyard. I laughed, a dry sound. They don't want the gold, Marcus. They just want the shine. He put his fork down. He looked me in the eye. I am paying the invoice, he said, not your father. I wired the money myself an hour ago. I want you to know that this isn't charity, and I am not doing it for Savannah. I am doing it because I want to eat this food on Christmas Eve. He paused, looking around the kitchen again. But Tessa, he added, if they push you, if they try to make you small. I pushed off the counter. I won't let them. I said, not anymore. I told you I would do this dinner, and I will. I will make it the best meal they have ever had. I looked him dead in the eye. But listen to me. Marcus, I am doing this as a professional. I am fulfilling a contract, but I am not their safety net anymore. Lacking a caterer was their mistake. I am fixing it for a fee. But if they try to sabotage me, or if they try to disrespect me while I'm doing it, I will walk away. I took a breath. Lately, I have realized something. I have spent my whole life trying to put out the fires they start. I have been the firefighter for their bad decisions. But this time, I won't save them if they decide to burn their own house down. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. He didn't try to argue. He didn't try to defend them. He nodded. I think that is fair, he said. He picked up his wine glass and toasted me. To burning houses, he said. I clinked my glass against his. To fire insurance, I replied. He laughed. It was a genuine, warm sound. We finished the tasting in a comfortable silence. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was fighting a war. I felt like I was sitting with an equal. But as he left, walking out into the cold December night, I knew the war wasn't over. It was just escalating. Marcus was beginning to see the truth, but my family was still living in their fantasy. And on Christmas Eve, those two realities were going to collide. I just had to make sure I was the one holding the match. Christmas Eve arrived in Lakebridge like a tale of two cities. On the north side of town, at the newly purchased estate of Savannah Rios and Marcus Hale, the scene was set for a coronation. The house was a masterpiece of architectural excess. A 10-foot fir tree dominated the foyer, draped in monochromatic cream ribbons and glass ornaments that cost more than my monthly rent. The lighting had been professionally rigged by a production crew to ensure that every angle was flattering for the cameras. The dining table was a long runway of mahogany, set with crystal glasses and gold-rimmed chargers, waiting for the feast that would cement my sister's status as the queen of holiday hosting. On the south side of town, at Willow and Ember, the scene was chaos, but it was the warm, rhythmic chaos of a heartbeat. The kitchen was already 80 degrees. The air smelled of roasting beef, blooming yeast, and caramelized sugar. Thanks to the sudden influx of funding, a quiet donation from a certain hospitality executive, we had expanded the community dinner. We were not just serving the homeless shelter regulars today. We were serving the lonely, the stranded, the first responders working the holiday shift, and anyone who needed a place to be. I stood in the locker room at the restaurant, looking at my phone. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. According to the contract I had sent, and which my father had signed, the final labor fee and the remaining balance for the event execution were due by midnight last night. I opened my banking app. I refreshed the page. Payment pending. 0. I stared at the screen. My parents had paid the initial deposit for the ingredients because they had to, but when it came time to pay me for my time, for my labor, for the actual work of being the chef, they had stalled. I knew exactly what they were thinking. It was a power move. They reasoned that I was already committed. They reasoned that I wouldn't dare ruin Christmas over a few $1,000s. They thought that if they just didn't send the money, I would show up anyway because I was desperate for their approval, or because I was too afraid to cause a scene. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was still the girl who sat in the driveway crying over a bus pass. I closed the app. I opened the settings on my phone. I tapped the Do Not Disturb icon. Then, for good measure, I turned the phone off completely and shoved it deep into the back of my locker. I put on my chef coat. I tied my apron. I walked into the kitchen. "All right, team," I shouted, clapping my hands. "We have 400 mouths to feed. Let us make this the best service of the year." The kitchen roared back in agreement. At Savannah's house, the clock struck 4 in the afternoon. The guests had arrived. It was a who's who of Lakebridge society, sprinkled with a few minor celebrities from Chicago and a handful of lifestyle influencers who were already live streaming the decor. They mingled in the foyer, sipping champagne, admiring the beige aesthetic. But there was a problem. The kitchen was empty. Well, not entirely empty. The raw ingredients I had ordered were there. Boxes of truffles, crates of lobster, pounds of prime beef. I had allowed the delivery to go through because I was not a thief. The food was there. But there was no chef. There was no prep team. There were no burners on. My father was pacing in the hallway, his face a mask of growing panic. He had been calling my phone for 2 hours. "She is not picking up," he hissed to my mother. "Hiding behind a large potted fern. It goes straight to voicemail." "She is just running late," my mother whispered back, her smile tight and brittle as she waved at a cousin. "You know how she is. She likes the drama. She will burst in any minute, sweaty and frantic, and save the day." But the clock ticked to 4:30, then 5. Guests were starting to glance toward the dining room. They were hungry. They had saved their appetites for the promised 10-course tasting menu. My father, however, was a man who always had a backup plan, or so he thought. He had not fully trusted me. He had secretly hired a backup catering company, a safety net service just in case I failed. He had booked them to bring a standard holiday buffet, kept in warming trucks nearby, ready to deploy if I embarrassed him. He stepped into the garage and called the backup coordinator. "Where are you?" he barked into the phone. "The guests are looking at their watches." There was a crackle of static on the line, and then a voice filled with apology and wind noise. "Mr. Rios, I am so sorry. We are stuck on the interstate. There is a massive pileup near the exit. A semi-truck jackknifed in the snow. We have been sitting here for 2 hours. The police say the road is closed. We are not going to make it." My father dropped the phone. The blood drained from his face. He looked at the driveway. It was snowing heavily now, a white curtain closing off the world. Inside, Savannah was holding court near the fireplace. She was laughing, posing for a photo with a brand of sparkling water. "So, when does the food start?" an influencer asked, holding up her phone to record the answer. "Everyone is dying to taste this menu. I heard your sister is a genius." Savannah's smile faltered. She looked around for me. She looked for the white coat. She looked for the help. "She is just plating up the first course." Savannah lied, her voice rising in pitch. "It is very intricate, very avant-garde." Back at Willow and Ember, the dining room was a sea of noise and warmth. We had pushed all the tables together. There were no assigned seats. A banker was sitting next to a busker. A retired teacher was passing a bowl of mashed potatoes to a young mechanic. I was walking through the dining room with a large tray of fresh sourdough bread. "Chef Tessa," someone called out, "this roast beef is melting in my mouth." I smiled. "Genuine and bright. I'm glad you like it." "Mrs. Higgins, save room for dessert. We have hot cocoa with homemade marshmallows." I walked past a table of kids. They were shrieking with laughter as they dunked giant, fluffy marshmallows into mugs of steaming chocolate. They had chocolate mustaches. They were happy. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Leo, my manager. "Chef," he said quietly, "the landline in the office has rung 10 times in the last 5 minutes. It is your mother." "Let it ring," I said, placing the bread on a table. "But—" "Leo," I said, turning to him, "I am working. I am fulfilling the only contract that was honored today." Leo looked at me, saw the steel in my eyes, and nodded. He went back to the office and took the phone off the hook. Back at the estate, the hunger was turning into hostility. It was 6 o'clock. There was no food. The raw lobsters were sitting in the fridge, turning gray. The truffles were drying out on the counter. There was no one in the house who knew how to cook them. My mother could barely boil water. Savannah had never turned on an oven in her life. The guests were whispering, "Where is Tessa? I thought she was the chef. Is this some kind of fasting experience? This is so unprofessional." My mother was cornered by Aunt Linda near the punch bowl. "Linda, where is that girl?" Aunt Linda asked, her stomach rumbling audibly. "Oh, you know Tessa," my mother said, her laugh sounding like breaking glass. "She is so charitable. She probably got stuck at the shelter helping the poor. She just loses track of time when she is doing her saintly work." Aunt Linda rolled her eyes. "She is the only one in this family who actually works, isn't she? Shame you didn't treat her better. Maybe we would be eating right now." My mother turned purple. Marcus stood on the balcony, watching the snow fall. He held a glass of scotch in his hand. He had not joined the panic. He had not called my phone. He watched his future father-in-law screaming into a cell phone in the hallway. He watched his fiancée frantically ordering pizzas on an app, trying to hide the screen from her guests. He took his phone out of his pocket. He had a notification, a scheduled email. It had arrived at 4 o'clock, the exact moment service was supposed to begin. Subject: Notice of service cancellation. To Marcus Hale, Savannah Rios, parents. Per Section 4, Paragraph 2 of our agreement, failure to remit the final labor fee and execution balance by the agreed deadline will result in immediate suspension of all services. As of this morning, the payment is pending. Therefore, I am unable to provide the labor for your event. The ingredients have been delivered as per the deposit. I trust you can find someone to prepare them. I have reallocated my team and my time to the community dinner at Willow and Ember, where our efforts are funded and appreciated. Marcus, I hope you understand. I do not work for exposure, and I do not work for people who think they can trick me into submission. Have a meaningful Christmas, wherever you end up. Tessa. Marcus read the email. He didn't look angry. He looked at the chaos inside the house. He saw Savannah yelling at a delivery driver on the phone because the pizza place was closed for the holiday. He saw the guests putting on their coats, muttering about going to a diner. He saw the emptiness of it all, the expensive decorations, the perfect lighting, the beautiful people, and the absolute hollow core. He finished his scotch. He set the glass on the railing. He walked back inside. He grabbed his heavy wool coat from the rack. Savannah saw him. She rushed over, grabbing his arm. Her eyes were wild with panic. "Marcus, where are you going? The pizza is coming. We can salvage this. We can make it a funny story for the vlog. The Christmas the chef ghosted us. It will be viral." Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm. He looked at her face, so desperate to spin the narrative, so desperate to maintain the illusion. "No, Savannah," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried through the silent foyer. "What do you mean, no? You can't leave. The brand representatives are here." "I am going to get dinner," Marcus said. "But we have dinner coming." "I am going to get real dinner," he corrected. "I am going to a place where people actually prepare food for others out of respect, not for a photo opportunity." He pulled his arm away. Savannah gasped. "You are going to her? You are going to that soup kitchen?" "Marcus, you can't. Think of the image. You are a Hale. You don't eat in a cafeteria." Marcus buttoned his coat. "I would rather eat a sandwich in a parking lot than stand here and watch you lie to these people one more time," he said. He looked around the room, addressing the shocked guests. "I apologize, everyone. There is no dinner. The chef was treated like a servant, so she quit. If you want to eat, I suggest you go home to your families." He turned back to Savannah. "And Savannah, you can film the candles and the empty glasses if you want, but I am done being a prop in your background." He walked out the front door. Savannah stood there, frozen. The camera crew she had hired was still rolling. They caught the exact moment her face crumbled. They caught the guests awkwardly shuffling toward the door. They caught the table set for a feast that never came. Outside, Marcus got into his car. He didn't look back at the mansion glowing on the hill. He turned his car south, toward the river, toward the part of town where the streetlights were dimmer but the windows were brighter. He drove toward the smoke and the fire. He drove toward the only person in the Rios family who had ever told him the truth. The snow was falling harder now, coating the streets of Lakebridge in a thick, silent blanket of white. But inside Willow and Ember, the air was warm and vibrant. The service was winding down. The chaotic symphony of clattering pans and shouting orders had softened into the gentle hum of satisfaction. I was standing near table 4, bending down to speak to Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old woman who came to our community dinner every year. She was gripping my hand with frail, paper-thin fingers, thanking me for the extra container of turkey I had packed for her to take home. I placed a fresh, warm roll on her plate, smiling as her eyes lit up. It was a small gesture, a piece of bread that cost pennies to make, but in that moment, it was worth more than the entire untouched feast sitting on my sister's mahogany table. When I stood up and turned toward the entrance, I stopped. Marcus Hale was standing just inside the glass doors. He was shaking the snow off his heavy wool coat. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, and his hair was damp. He looked out of place in his bespoke suit among the worn coats and knit caps of our guests. Yet he did not look uncomfortable. He looked like a man who had finally found the right address. He stood there for a few minutes, just watching. He watched the volunteers clearing plates. He watched Leo pouring coffee. He watched me wipe a smudge of gravy off the edge of a table. He watched the room breathe. Then he walked toward me. He did not walk with the swagger of a corporate executive. He walked with a quiet purpose. In his hand, he held a bottle of wine. It was a vintage Cabernet, the label dark and expensive, the kind of bottle my father would keep in a locked cabinet to show off but never drink. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling a sudden spike of nervousness that had nothing to do with cooking. "You came," I said, my voice barely carrying over the low murmur of the dining room. He stopped in front of me. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "I brought something," he said, holding out the bottle. "It is the only authentic thing that was left at Savannah's house. a bottle of good wine that no one there knew how to open properly. I looked at the bottle, then up at his face. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, sudden and genuine. It was the absurdity of it all, the fiancé's sister and the groom, standing in a soup kitchen on Christmas Eve, sharing a bottle of wine meant for a coronation. I took the bottle. It felt heavy and cool in my hand. "We do not have crystal glasses here, Marcus," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. He smiled back. "I am counting on it." I led him back into the kitchen. The team was in the early stages of breakdown. Sarah was scrubbing the butcher block. David was organizing the spice rack. When they saw me walk in with a stranger in a suit, they paused. "Everyone, this is Marcus," I announced. "He is a friend." I grabbed a stack of small, durable juice glasses from the rack. I uncorked the wine with a quick twist of my wrist, a motion I had performed thousands of times, and poured a splash for everyone present. "To the best brigade in Lakebridge," I said, raising my glass. "To the chef," David shouted, raising his... Marcus raised his glass too. "To the real dinner," he said softly. We drank. The wine was complex, rich with notes of dark cherry and oak, but it tasted better because we were drinking it standing up, leaning against stainless steel counters, surrounded by people who had worked hard for no reward other than the feeling of doing good. It was a private party for my new family, right there in the heart of the kitchen. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, the storm inside the Rios estate was raging harder than the blizzard outside. The guests had left. The influencers had packed up their ring lights and gone to find food elsewhere. The house was empty, save for the extended family who had been too polite or too horrified to leave. They were hungry, they were angry, and they were looking for someone to blame. My father was pacing the living room, his face a dangerous shade of purple. My mother was sitting on the sofa, weeping into a napkin, bemoaning the ruin of her social standing. Savannah was frantically texting, trying to do damage control on social media, deleting comments asking why the groom had walked out. Then, the questioning started. Uncle Mike, a man who had no patience for pretension, slammed his hand on the empty table. "Where is Tessa?" he demanded. "I want a straight answer. You told us she was busy. You told us she was running late. But Marcus just walked out to go find her. Why isn't she here?" My father stopped pacing. He looked at the circle of angry faces. He tried to bluster his way through it. "She is difficult. She demanded money. She tried to extort us." "That is not what I heard," Aunt Linda said, her voice sharp. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I heard Grandma on the phone yesterday. I heard what you told her." The room went silent. "You banned her from Thanksgiving," Aunt Linda stated. It was not a question. My mother looked up, her eyes wide. We just thought, for the photos." "For the photos?" Aunt Linda repeated, incredulous. "You banned your own daughter from a family holiday because she works for a living? Because she wears a uniform?" My father tried to intervene. "You do not understand. Linda, the image." "To hell with the image!" Uncle Mike shouted. "We are sitting here with empty stomachs on Christmas Eve because you people are so obsessed with appearances that you treated the only talented person in this family like a servant." Savannah jumped in, her voice shrill. "She is jealous. She did this on purpose to humiliate me. She wanted to ruin my engagement." "Nobody believes that." Savannah, a cousin, spoke up from the corner. "We saw the email Marcus got. We saw his face." Aunt Linda walked over to my mother. She looked down at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You know what your problem is, Linda?" she asked quietly. But in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. "You are more afraid of the smell of cooking oil than you are of the smell of ingratitude, and now you reek of it." The insult landed physically. My mother flinched. My father, unable to handle the shame, unable to accept that he was the architect of this disaster, grabbed his car keys. "We are going to get her," he snarled. "She is going to fix this. She has a kitchen full of food. She is going to bring it here." He looked at Savannah. "Get your coat. We are going to Willow and Ember." They piled into the car, a desperate, furious trio, driving through the snow to demand salvation from the person they had cast aside. At the restaurant, we were finishing the cleanup. The last bag of trash had been taken out. The floors were mopped and drying. The volunteers were packing up their things, holding bags of leftover cookies I had baked for them. The mood was light. Marcus was talking to David about the vegetable prep, listening intently as David explained his technique for peeling 50 pounds of potatoes. Then, the front door banged open. The sound echoed through the empty dining room like a thunderclap. I turned around. My father, my mother, and Savannah stormed in. They were covered in snow. My mother's expensive heels were slipping on the wet floor. Savannah's mascara was running down her face. They did not look like the royalty they had pretended to be an hour ago. They looked frantic. My father saw me standing in the open kitchen. He marched straight toward the pass. His finger pointed at my chest like a weapon. "You," he shouted, "you humiliated the family." The laughter in the kitchen died instantly. Sarah took a step back, looking frightened. David moved slightly in front of me, protective, but I put a hand on his arm to stop him. I stepped forward. I did not flinch. "Good evening. Dad," I said, "the restaurant is closed." "Closed?" he screamed. He slammed his hand onto the stainless steel pass, leaving a smudge on the surface I had just polished. "You think you can just walk away? You have a whole house full of hungry people. You made us look like fools." I looked at him. I looked at the vein pulsing in his forehead. "I did not make you look like anything. Dad," I said calmly, "I sent you a contract. You signed it. You failed to pay the labor fee. I suspended services. That is business." "Business?" he spat. "We are your parents. You left us with nothing." I walked around the counter so there was nothing between us. I stood my ground, feeling the heat of the kitchen at my back and the cold anger of my father in my face. "I am a chef," I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing off the tile walls. "I cook food. I nourish people. I am not insurance for your image. I am not a prop you can pull out of the closet when your caterer cancels and then shove back in the dark when the camera is rolling." My mother stepped forward then. She pulled the victim card she had been holding in her sleeve for 30 years. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. "Tessa, please," she sobbed. "We only wanted the best for you. We wanted you to be part of the celebration. We wanted the best for Savannah. Why are you so cruel?" I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had told me not to sit on the furniture because I smelled like onions. "The best?" I repeated. I took a step closer to her. "You banned me from Thanksgiving. Mom, you missed my graduation. You told me my career was a phase. You treated me like hired help in my own home." I shook my head slowly. "The best you are talking about was never for me. It was for the picture on your mantel. And I am done setting myself on fire to keep that picture warm." Savannah pushed past my mother. She saw Marcus standing in the back of the kitchen, leaning against the prep table. She saw that he wasn't looking at her with concern. He was looking at her with disappointment. She panicked. She tried to drag him back into her orbit. "Marcus," she cried, reaching for him, "why are you standing there? Do you not see what she is doing? She is doing this to show off. She is betraying the family to make herself look like a hero to these strangers." She gestured wildly at my team, at the volunteers who had spent their holiday serving others. "She is just doing it for attention," she screamed. "She is fake." Marcus straightened up. He set his glass of wine down on the counter with a sharp click. He walked past Savannah. He did not look at her. He walked until he was standing next to me. He looked at Savannah, then at my parents. "The only person doing anything for attention here is you." "Savannah," he said. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking wood. He looked at me. He looked at the burns on my arms, the apron stained with cranberry and gravy, the tired but proud set of my shoulders. Then he turned to the room. He addressed my staff, my volunteers, and my family. "I have spent 10 years in the hospitality industry," Marcus said. "I have met Michelin star chefs. I have met celebrity restaurateurs. And I have met investors worth billions. He paused. And I have never seen a kitchen run with more integrity than this one. He looked at my father. You called her a disappointment. You called her a servant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the steel counter in front of me. Fable Harbor Hospitality is launching a new investment division next quarter, Marcus announced. We are looking for flagship concepts. Concepts that focus on community, on authenticity, on real food. He looked at me, and for a moment, the rest of the room disappeared. I am officially offering a partnership to the Hearthline project, he said. Fable Harbor will prioritize this deal. We will provide the capital. You provide the vision. My father's jaw dropped. My mother stopped crying mid-sob. Savannah looked like she had been slapped. Anyone who can do what I saw Tessa do today, Marcus continued, his voice rising with conviction, deserves to have their name on the building. Not in the fine print, not hidden in the kitchen while an influencer takes the credit. He looked at Savannah one last time. I am done with the smoke and mirrors. Savannah, I am investing in the real thing. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence in the kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then, David started clapping. It started slow, a rhythmic applause from the man who knew what it was like to be invisible. Then Sarah joined in. Then Leo. Then the high school students. Within moments, the entire kitchen erupted. They were cheering. They were clapping. Sarah was wiping tears from her eyes. I stood there, stunned. I looked at the card on the counter. Hearthline. My dream. It was real. I looked up at Marcus. He nodded at me, a small, private smile on his face. My family stood on the other side of the pass. They were isolated. They were small. They were 3 people in expensive coats, standing in a warm, bright room that they had no part in. My father opened his mouth to speak, to claim credit, to say that this was what he had intended all along, but he looked at the wall of support behind me, at the man standing beside me, and he realized he had no voice here. They had come to drag the help back to the mansion. Instead, they found themselves standing in the presence of a CEO and his new partner. They had never looked more out of place. The silence in the kitchen following Marcus's announcement was absolute. It was not the silence of a library or a church. It was the vacuum created when a bomb detonates, sucking all the oxygen out of the room before the shockwave hits. My father stood there, his mouth slightly agape, staring at the business card on the counter as if it were a loaded weapon. My mother had frozen mid-sob, her tears drying instantly as her brain calculated the net worth of the partnership Marcus had just offered me. Savannah looked like someone had physically struck her. Her entire reality, built on the premise that she was the star and I was the failure, had just shattered on the floor of a soup kitchen. Then, the pivot happened. It was nauseating to watch. My father blinked, shook his head as if waking from a trance, and forced a wide, beaming smile onto his face. He stepped forward, ignoring the hostility radiating from my staff, and reached out as if to embrace me. Well, he boomed, his voice regaining its false, salesman confidence. This is wonderful news. Absolutely wonderful. We always knew Tessa had it in her. My mother scrambled to join him, nodding vigorously. Yes, exactly. We have always supported her potential. We knew she just needed the right push. That is why we were so hard on you. Tessa, we wanted you to strive for greatness, and look at you now, a partner with Fable Harbor. They were trying to jump onto a moving train. They saw the power shifting. They saw the money on the table, and they were desperate to rewrite the narrative before the ink was even dry. They wanted to claim my victory as their own. They wanted to tell the world that my success was a product of their parenting. I felt a cold to sharp anger rise in my chest. It was not the hot, reactive anger of the past. It was the icy, unyielding resolve of a glacier. Stop, I said. I did not shout. I did not raise my voice. I simply spoke the word with enough weight to crush their sudden enthusiasm. I stepped back, putting the stainless steel pass between us. It was a barrier, a border they were no longer allowed to cross. Do not rewrite history, I said, looking my father in the eye. Do not stand there in front of my team and my partner and pretend you had anything to do with this. Tessa, darling, don't be dramatic. My mother tried to interject, her smile faltering. I turned to her. You did not come to my culinary school graduation. I said, I scanned the crowd for you for 3 hours. You were in a hotel room helping Savannah film a skincare routine. My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. You banned me from Thanksgiving yesterday. I continued, my voice steady and clear. You told me explicitly that my presence was unwanted because my uniform would ruin the aesthetic of your photos. You told me I smelled like grease. You told me I was not good enough to sit at your table. I looked at my father. And for Christmas, you tried to manipulate me into working for free. You signed a contract you had no intention of paying. You tried to exploit my labor to save your reputation. And when I refused to be used, you stormed in here to scream at me in front of my staff. I looked around the kitchen, ensuring everyone heard me. This deal, this partnership, this has nothing to do with you. You do not get to claim credit for the daughter you tried to hide. My father's face turned a dark, mottled red. The friendly facade cracked, revealing the bully underneath. You do not have the right to speak to us that way, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. We are your parents. We gave you life. You owe us respect. I shook my head slowly. My debt to you is paid. Dad, I said, I paid it with years of trying to please you. I paid it with years of letting you make me feel small so Savannah could feel big. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs. It tasted of freedom. The rights of a parent end where the exploitation of a child begins. I said, you do not treat me like a daughter. You treat me like a tool. You treat me like an appliance you can kick when it does not work and brag about when it does. I placed my hands flat on the cool metal counter. From today forward, I am not your servant. I am not your doormat. If you want to speak to me, you will do so as a business associate. We will have boundaries. And if you cannot respect those boundaries, then we will not speak at all. The room was deadly quiet. Even the dishwasher had cycled off, leaving only the sound of my father's ragged breathing. Savannah, realizing that her parents were losing control of the situation, turned her desperation toward Marcus. She grabbed his arm, her fingernails digging into his coat. Marcus, please, she pleaded, her voice high and frantic. You cannot seriously be listening to this. She is having a breakdown. She is attacking Mom and Dad. You are supposed to be on my side. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, waiting for him to defend her, waiting for him to tell me I was being cruel. Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm. He gently, but firmly, peeled her fingers off his coat. He stepped away from her, creating a physical distance that felt like a canyon. I am on the side of respect. Savannah, Marcus said. His voice was calm, sad, and final. He looked at my parents, then back at her. I have watched you for 2 days, he said. I have watched how you treat the people who do the work. I have watched how you lie to cameras. I have watched how you treat your own sister like she is disposable. He reached into his pocket. I do not want a life built on that, he said. I do not want a marriage that is just a series of photo opportunities. And I definitely do not want to raise children in a family where love is conditional on how good they look in a picture. He pulled out a small velvet box. It was the ring box. He hadn't even been wearing the ring. He had carried it with him, perhaps knowing this moment was coming. He placed the box on the counter next to the business card he had given me. I think you should keep this, he said to Savannah. You can sell it. It should cover the cost of the caterer you didn't pay. Savannah stared at the box. She gasped, a sound of pure shock. Marcus? No, she whispered. You can't. The wedding. The magazine feature. It is over. Savannah, he said. I wish you luck. I hope you find someone who is willing to accept this version of you, but I am not him. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. It was the sound of a world collapsing. Savannah stood there, staring at the ring box, her face pale. My parents were frozen, watching their golden ticket walk away from them. Somewhere in the back, the industrial dishwasher kicked back on with a low hum. It was a gritty, real sound. Life was continuing. Dishes were being washed. The world did not stop just because Savannah Rios was unhappy. My mother, realizing that everything was slipping away, the money, the status, the control, lashed out with the only weapon she had left: fear. She looked at me with venom in her eyes. "You will be alone." "Tessa," she hissed, "you think this is a victory? You are driving your family away. You will wake up one day in your little apartment, smelling like old food, and you will have no one to care for you, no one to love you. You will be miserable and alone." It was the curse she had always threatened me with, the idea that without them, I was nothing. I looked around my kitchen. I saw Sarah, who had worked a double shift just to help me feed the hungry. I saw David, who had once been homeless, but now stood tall with dignity because I gave him a chance. I saw Marcus, a man who barely knew me but saw my worth more clearly in 2 days than my mother had in 30 years. I looked back at my mother. "I am not alone. Mom," I said softly. I gestured to the team behind me. "I have a family. It is a loud, messy, hard-working family. We smell like onions and hard work, but we show up. We respect each other." I looked her dead in the eye. "I am not alone," I repeated. "I am just finally finished being lonely inside your house." I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out a white envelope. I had written it the night before, knowing this moment would come eventually. I slid the envelope across the counter toward her. It stopped right next to the ring box. "This is for you," I said. "What is this?" my father asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "It is a list of my terms," I said. I listed them out, my voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. 1. I will not attend any event organized solely for the purpose of a photograph. If you want to see me, we meet in private, without cameras, without phones. 2. You are forbidden from using my name, my likeness, or my recipes to promote Savannah's brand or your own status. If I see my name on a post without my written consent, my lawyer will contact you. 3. I will no longer tolerate comments about my appearance, my smell, or my profession. The next time you tell me I smell like grease, I will leave, and I will not come back for a year. They stared at me, stunned by the precision of my boundaries. "And one last thing," I said. I took a step back, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marcus and my team. "You banned me from Thanksgiving because of a uniform," I said. "You chose a piece of clothing over your daughter. So today, I am making a choice too. I am banning myself from your table. I will not sit at a table where I am not respected. Until you can learn to treat me like a human being, do not expect me for dinner." My father opened his mouth to argue, to shout, to bully me back into submission, but he looked at Marcus standing beside me, looking formidable and resolved. He looked at my staff, who were glaring at him with open hostility. He looked at the ring box sitting on the counter, a symbol of his total failure. He closed his mouth. There was nothing left to say. They had no leverage. They had no power. "Come on," my father muttered to my mother and Savannah. "Let's go." They turned and walked toward the door. They moved slowly, like people walking through deep water. Savannah grabbed the ring box before she left, clutching it to her chest like a life raft. My mother was sobbing quietly again, but this time, no one moved to comfort her. They walked out into the snowy night. The heavy glass door swung shut behind them, sealing out the cold, sealing out the drama, sealing out the past. For the first time in their lives, they were leaving a scene without a victory. They were leaving with nothing but the crushing realization that they had pushed the wrong daughter too far. The kitchen was quiet for a long moment. Then, Marcus turned to me. He looked concerned. He searched my face, looking for cracks, looking for the heartbreak that usually follows a severance like that. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I took a breath. I inhaled the scent of the kitchen, the roasted turkey, the sanitizer, the wood smoke, the coffee. It smelled like home. I let the breath out. My shoulders dropped 2 inches. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for 15 years unraveled. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. For the first time in my life, I am actually okay. He smiled. It wasn't a romantic smile, not yet. It was the smile of a partner, of a witness, of a friend. "Good," he said. I turned back to the line. I looked at my team. They were watching me, waiting for a cue. The service wasn't over, the work wasn't done, and that was the beauty of it. The work was always there, grounding me, saving me. I unbuttoned my chef coat, revealing the simple t-shirt underneath. I rolled up my sleeves. "All right, everyone," I called out, my voice strong and happy. "The show is over. The festival is done. Let's wash this kitchen down." A cheer went up from the sink. David turned the sprayer back on. Sarah cranked up the radio, and the sounds of a holiday pop song filled the room. I walked to the sink and plunged my hands into the warm, soapy water. I scrubbed a roasting pan, watching the grease dissolve, watching the water turn dark. It was simple work. It was honest work. Outside, the snow was falling gently, coating the world in silence. I looked up at the reflection in the dark window glass. I saw myself. I didn't see a disappointment. I didn't see a background character. I didn't see a stain on a perfect picture. I saw Tessa Rios, chef, partner, owner. I saw a woman who had cooked her own story, from scratch, using fire and steel. And for the first time, I didn't want to be at anyone else's table. My own table was full, and the food was delicious. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you are tuning in from and if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with your family. Please do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it.